his boot pressed into her shoulder. Coffee soaked through her gray uniform cold against the warehouse floor. "Stay down, trash," Derek Vance's voice echoed as 40 employees watched in frozen silence. The 54-year-old cafeteria worker didn't move, didn't fight, didn't speak. But behind those quiet eyes, Commander Margaret Stone, 28 years, DevGru, 47 classified missions. The woman who once extracted a CIA asset from Tehran surrounded by revolutionary guards was counting. 72 hours. That's all he had left before his entire world collapsed. And she would be the one holding the detonator. If you enjoy stories about justice and underdogs who refuse to stay down, subscribe to our channel and follow this story to the very end. Comment your city below. Let us know how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights of Blackwell defense contractors hummed overhead as Margaret Stone pushed her food cart through the East Corridor at exactly 11:47 a.m. Same time as yesterday. Same time as every day for the past 11 months. She moved slowly, deliberately, her orthopedic shoes squeaking against the polished floor. A woman of 54 with graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, reading glasses, hanging from a beaded chain around her neck, a slight stoop to her shoulders that made her seem smaller than she was. Invisible. Forgettable. Exactly as intended. "Morning, Maggie." The voice came from behind her. Tom Hendricks, third-floor maintenance, 62 years old, divorced twice, called his daughter in Portland. Every Sunday night had a gambling problem he thought nobody knew about. "Morning, Tom." She smiled, the kind of smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Warm. Genuine. The smile of a woman who had learned to see people when most of the world looked right through them. "Coffee's fresh today. Got those chocolate donuts you like?" "You're a saint, Maggie. Don't let anyone tell you different." She watched him walk away, his slight limp from the knee replacement surgery he'd had 3 months ago, a little more pronounced today. Rain coming probably. His joints always predicted the weather better than any forecast. Day 334. Mission status ongoing. Cover identity intact. The words ran through her mind like a morning prayer, the same way they had every day since she'd walked through Blackwell's front doors pretending to be someone she wasn't. Margaret Hayes on her employee badge. Maggie to the people she served coffee and sandwiches to every day. A widow, they thought. A grandmother of 3. A woman who had worked food service her whole life and was counting down the years until Social Security kicked in. None of it was true. Her real name was Margaret Stone. Commander Margaret Stone, United States Navy, retired. 28 years of service, most of it in places that didn't appear on any map, doing things that would never appear in any official record. DevGru, Development Group. The unit most people knew by its Hollywood name, SEAL Team 6. But Maggie hadn't been a door kicker. She'd been something far more dangerous. Intelligence. The woman who found the doors before anyone else knew they existed. The woman who spent months, sometimes years, becoming someone else entirely so she could learn secrets that kept her country safe. She had been retired for 3 years when the call came. "We need you back, Maggie. One more mission." She'd said no. She had a garden now. Tomatoes that actually grew. A book club that met every Thursday. A life that didn't require her to lie about who she was every waking moment. But then they told her about Blackwell. Weapons disappearing. Military-grade equipment being diverted to buyers who would use them to kill American soldiers overseas. And someone inside the company making it all happen. "We need someone who can get inside without raising suspicion," the voice on the phone had said. "Someone they won't look at twice." An older woman, a cafeteria worker, the most invisible person in any corporate hierarchy. Maggie had been invisible her whole career. One more time wouldn't kill her. What she hadn't expected was Derek Vance. The name had appeared in her preliminary briefing. Head of Security. Former Army Ranger. Honorable discharge, though the file suggested the honorable part had been negotiated rather than earned. Anger issues. 2 complaints from female employees that had somehow vanished from official records. A bully, she'd thought. She'd dealt with bullies before. They were predictable, manageable. She'd been wrong. "Hey, lunch lady." The voice cut through the corridor like a blade. Maggie stopped. Her cart turned slowly, arranged her features into an expression of mild confusion. Derek Vance walked toward her with the swagger of a man who had never been truly challenged in his life. 38 years old, broad-shouldered, a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Behind him, two of his security team followed like shadows. Marcus Webb, logistics supervisor, the one with gambling debts. And a younger man Maggie didn't recognize. New hire, probably. They rotated through quickly under Vance. "You're not supposed to be in this corridor, Grandma." Vance stopped 3 feet away, close enough to intimidate. "This is a restricted area." Maggie blinked, adjusted her glasses. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I must have taken a wrong turn. I was just trying to find—" "I don't care what you were trying to find." His voice dropped cold and flat. "You don't belong here. You don't belong anywhere near anything important. You belong in the kitchen, making sandwiches, staying out of the way. Understand?" 28 years of training kept her face neutral, kept her hands from doing what they wanted to do. "Yes, sir. I'm very sorry. It won't happen again." "See that it doesn't." He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne, the kind men wore when they wanted to project power they didn't actually have. "I've got my eye on you, Maggie. Something about you doesn't sit right with me." Her heart rate didn't change. Her pupils didn't dilate. She'd been trained to control those tells before this man had learned to tie his shoes. "I'm just a lunch lady, Mr. Vance. Nothing special about me at all." He stared at her for a long moment, searching for something. She gave him nothing. "Get out of here. And next time, watch where you're going." She turned her cart around, moving with the careful, unhurried pace of a woman who had nowhere important to be. Behind her, she heard Vance laugh, heard one of his men say something she couldn't quite catch. It didn't matter. She'd gotten what she came for. In the 30 seconds she'd stood in that restricted corridor, she'd counted 14 security cameras, noted the keycard reader model on the laboratory door, and memorized the shipping schedule posted on the wall behind Marcus Webb's shoulder. Invisible had its advantages. Up. The employee break room smelled like burnt coffee and resignation. Maggie sat at her usual table in the corner, unwrapping a sandwich she'd made that morning. Turkey on wheat. Same thing every day. Routine was the friend of cover identities. Around her, other employees drifted in and out. Accountants complaining about deadlines. Engineers arguing about specifications. The normal rhythm of corporate life. And then she heard the crying. It was quiet, controlled, the kind of crying that came from someone trying very hard not to be noticed. Maggie looked up from her sandwich and saw her. Elena Ruiz, 26 years old, administrative assistant in the logistics department. Daughter of immigrants, first in her family to get a college degree, sent half her paycheck home to her mother every month. Maggie had been watching her for weeks, not because Elena was a suspect, but because Elena was kind. The kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday, who brought homemade cookies on Fridays, who treated the cafeteria workers like human beings when most of the executives couldn't be bothered to learn their names. Elena was also terrified. Maggie had seen the way she flinched when Vance walked into a room, had noticed the way she avoided being alone in hallways, had heard the whispered conversations that stopped whenever anyone came too close. Something was very wrong. "Honey." Maggie kept her voice soft, gentle, a grandmother's voice. "Are you okay?" Elena looked up, startled, and for a moment Maggie saw real fear in her eyes. Then the mask came down, the professional smile snapping into place like armor. "I'm fine, Mrs. Hayes. Just allergies." Maggie had been lied to by terrorists, by arms dealers, by foreign intelligence operatives who had trained their whole lives in deception. A 26-year-old administrative assistant wasn't going to fool her. "Those must be some serious allergies." She pulled out the chair across from her. "Sit down. Have some of my sandwich. You look like you haven't eaten in days." Elena hesitated. Maggie waited. In her experience, people wanted to talk. They just needed permission. Finally, Elena sat. "I can't—" She stopped, looked around. The break room lowered her voice. "I can't talk about it here." "Then we won't talk about it here." Maggie pushed half her sandwich across the table. "Eat. Whatever it is, you need your strength." Elena picked up the sandwich, but didn't eat it. Her hands were shaking. He's going to destroy me, Mrs. Hayes. He's going to destroy all of us. Maggie didn't ask who. She already knew. Tell me what happened. The story came out in fragments, whispered words between bites of sandwich, a picture that made Maggie's blood run cold, not with fear, but with a quiet, controlled rage she hadn't felt in years. Derek Vance had been harassing Elena for months. Comments at first, then touches that lingered too long, then demands that became increasingly explicit. When she'd tried to report him, the HR complaint had disappeared. When she'd gone to his supervisor, she'd been told that Vance was too valuable to the company to lose over a misunderstanding. 3 other women had quit rather than continue working under him. One had tried to file a formal complaint with the labor board. A week later, her car had been broken into, all her personal files stolen, and she'd received an anonymous message suggesting that bad things happened to women who didn't know when to stay quiet. "I'm trapped," Elena whispered. "I need this job. My mother needs my help, but every day I come in here I feel like I'm dying a little more." Maggie reached across the table and took Elena's hand. Her grip was firm, steadier than a lunch lady's probably should have been. "Listen to me very carefully, Elena. You are not trapped. You are not alone. And I promise you on everything I hold sacred that man will not hurt you anymore." Elena's eyes widened. "Mrs. Hayes, you don't understand. He's dangerous. He has connections. I understand more than you know." Maggie squeezed her hand once, then released it. "I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Just for a little while longer. Can you trust me?" Something in her voice must have penetrated the fear. Elena stared at her, really looked at her for perhaps the first time, and something shifted in her expression. "There's something different about you, isn't there? Something you're not telling anyone." Maggie smiled, and for just a moment the grandmother mask slipped, revealing something harder underneath. Something forged in decades of service and sacrifice. "We all have our secrets, honey. Some of us just hide them better than others." Tish. 3 days later, Derek Vance decided to make an example of her. The company all-hands meeting was held in the main warehouse, the largest space on the Blackwell campus. 400 employees gathered in folding chairs, listening to executives drone on about quarterly earnings and strategic initiatives. Maggie stood at the back with the other service staff waiting to distribute refreshments when the meeting ended. Her cart was loaded with coffee urns and pastries, everything arranged with the precision that had become second nature over 11 months of maintaining her cover. She saw Vance before he saw her. He stood near the front of the warehouse, surrounded by his security team, scanning the crowd with the predatory attention of a man looking for weakness. When his eyes found her, he smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. The meeting ended at 3:47 p.m. Employees began filing toward the exits, stopping at the refreshment tables for coffee and small talk. Maggie poured drinks, handed out napkins, smiled, and nodded at faces she'd memorized months ago. "Excuse me, everyone." Vance's voice cut through the chatter, amplified by the microphone he'd grabbed from the stage. "Before you all leave, I need to address something. A security matter." The crowd stopped moving. 400 faces turned toward him. "We've had some incidents lately. Unauthorized access to restricted areas. People wandering where they don't belong." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And I want everyone to understand that at Blackwell Defense, contractor security is not optional. It is absolute." His eyes found Maggie's across the warehouse. The smile widened. "Mrs. Hayes, could you come up here, please?" Maggie felt the attention of 400 people shift to her. She set down the coffee pot, carefully wiped her hands on her apron, and walked toward the front of the room. Every step measured, every breath controlled. 28 years of training wrapped around her like armor. "Is there a problem, Mr. Vance?" "That's what we're going to find out." He turned to the crowd, playing to his audience. "Mrs. Hayes here has been spotted in restricted areas 3 times in the past month. Each time she claims to have gotten lost. But I don't believe in coincidences." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Maggie felt their eyes on her, felt the weight of their judgment. "I've reviewed her file," Vance continued. 54 years old. Widow. No family in the area. Works alone, keeps to herself, asks questions that a cafeteria worker has no business asking. He stepped closer to her, looming over her smaller frame. "So I'm going to ask you directly in front of all your coworkers, Mrs. Hayes. What exactly are you doing at this company?" The warehouse fell silent, 400 people holding their breath. Maggie looked up at him, saw the triumph in his eyes, the absolute certainty that he had won, that he had broken her. She let her lip tremble, let her eyes fill with tears, let her voice shake. I don't understand. I'm just trying to do my job. I got lost, that's all. I'm an old woman, Mr. Vance. Sometimes I get confused." Confused. He laughed, the sound harsh in the silent room. "That's your excuse. You're confused. Please." She let a tear fall. "I need this job. I don't have anywhere else to go." Something flickered in his expression. Disappointment, maybe. He'd wanted her to fight, wanted her to give him an excuse, but Maggie Stone hadn't survived 28 years of intelligence work by giving people what they wanted. "Empty your pockets," Vance demanded. "Turn out everything you have on you, right now, in front of everyone." Maggie hesitated, then reached into her apron. Her hands shook as she pulled out the contents and laid them on a nearby table. A crumpled tissue, a ballpoint pen, a photograph of 3 children. Her grandchildren, she'd told everyone, though they were actually the children of a fallen teammate whose memory she carried everywhere. Nothing else. Nothing incriminating. Because Maggie Stone didn't make rookie mistakes. Vance stared at the pitiful collection, his jaw tightening with frustration. "That's it. That's everything." "Yes, sir." Her voice was small, defeated. "That's everything." He grabbed the photograph, held it up. "These your grandkids?" "Yes, sir." "Cute." He dropped it back on the table with deliberate carelessness. "Must be nice having something to live for. Something that would be really sad to lose." The threat hung in the air, naked and ugly. 400 people heard it. 400 people said nothing. Maggie picked up the photograph with trembling fingers, smoothed the crease his carelessness had made. "I understand, Mr. Vance. It won't happen again." "See that it doesn't." He turned back to the crowd, dismissing her entirely. "Let this be a lesson to everyone. At Blackwell, we take security seriously. Anyone who doesn't like that is free to find employment elsewhere." Maggie walked back to her cart, picked up the coffee pot, resumed serving drinks as if nothing had happened. But inside, behind the trembling hands and the tear-streaked face, Commander Margaret Stone was adding entries to a mental file that had been building for 11 months. Public humiliation check. Implied threat to family check. Abuse of authority in front of witnesses check. Derek Vance had no idea what he'd just done. He'd given her permission. That night, Maggie sat in her small apartment 3 miles from the Blackwell campus. The furniture was sparse, functional, the kind of cheap pieces that came with furnished rentals and told visitors nothing about their occupant. But behind the bookshelf, accessed by a mechanism no landlord would ever find, was a different room entirely. Screens glowed in the darkness. Secure communication equipment. Surveillance feeds from cameras so small they could hide in a button. She pulled up the recordings from today's meeting, watched Vance's performance from 6 different angles, listened to every word, every inflection, every implied threat. Then she opened a secure channel and began to type. "Priority urgent. Asset Stone. M. Status report. Day 334. Subject. Vance has escalated to public harassment and implied threats. Pattern consistent with narcissistic personality disorder and sociopathic tendencies. Recommend accelerated timeline for primary operation. Additionally, subject has intimate knowledge of security protocols beyond normal scope for position. Suspect direct involvement in weapons diversion rather than peripheral enabling role. Request authorization for enhanced surveillance. Final note, civilian Ruiz. Alina has been identified as potential witness/victim. Subject Vance has been conducting systematic harassment campaign against multiple female employees. Pattern suggests calculated intimidation to ensure silence regarding other activities. Recommend protective measures for RUIs and other identified victims once operation concludes. Stone out. She sent the message, watched it disappear into the encrypted void, then pulled up another screen. Personnel files, shipping manifests, security rotation schedules. The pieces were coming together. Derek Vance wasn't just a bully. He wasn't just running a harassment campaign against women who worked for him. He was the inside man. The weapons that had been disappearing, the military-grade equipment finding its way to foreign buyers, Vance was at the center of all of it, using his security position to create blind spots in surveillance, using his authority to intimidate anyone who got too close. Maggie had suspected for months. Now she was certain, but certainty wasn't enough. She needed proof. Documentation that would hold up in federal court. Evidence that would take down not just Vance, but everyone he was working with. And she was close. So close she could taste it. Her secure phone buzzed. A response from Washington. Authorization granted for enhanced surveillance. Timeline accelerated. Primary operation in 72 hours. Additional intelligence. Large shipment scheduled for Friday. Confirms weapons transfer. This is the target. Vance must be neutralized and evidence secured before shipment leaves facility. You are authorized for direct action if necessary. Stone, you've given 28 years. We're asking for 72 more hours. Make them count. Maggie read the message 3 times. Then she deleted it, pulled up her files on Vance, and began to plan. 72 hours. She thought about Elena trapped in a job with a predator, about the other women who had been driven away, silenced, threatened, about the weapons that would end up killing American soldiers if she didn't stop them. 72 hours. She thought about the photo Vance had dropped so carelessly. The children of a man who had died believing in something bigger than himself. She thought about 28 years of service, of sacrifice, of becoming invisible so others could live in the light. 72 hours. Then Derek Vance would learn what happened when you told the wrong woman to stay down. The next morning, Maggie arrived at work 15 minutes early. Same routine, same cart, same orthopedic shoes squeaking on polished floors. But today she moved differently. Nothing obvious. A surveillance expert would have had to watch her for hours to notice, but there was a purpose to her movements now, an intention that hadn't been there before. She was done watching, done gathering, done being invisible. It was time to hunt. Her first stop was the logistics department on the 3rd floor. Not the main office that was too exposed, but the secondary supply room where Marcus Webb kept his personal files. She'd been cultivating Marcus for months. Nothing aggressive, just a kind word here, an extra donut there, the sort of gentle attention that made lonely people feel seen. Marcus was lonely and desperate, and in debt to people who didn't accept payment plans. "Morning, Marcus." He jumped, nearly dropping the files he was carrying. "Jesus, Maggie, you scared me." "Sorry, honey." She held up a coffee cup, steam rising from the dark liquid. "Brought you something. You look like you haven't slept in days." He took the coffee with hands that trembled slightly. Dark circles under his eyes. Weight loss visible even in the loose fit of his shirt. "You're too good to me, Maggie. Really. You're the only person in this whole damn building who treats me like a human being." "That's because you are a human being, Marcus. Everyone deserves to be treated with kindness." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Tell that to Vance." "Vance." She let the name hang in the air. "He's been hard on you lately, hasn't he?" Marcus's expression shuddered. "I don't know what you mean." "It's okay." She lowered her voice, leaned closer. "I've seen how he looks at you. Like he owns you. Like he knows something he's holding over your head." The coffee cup trembled in his hands. "Maggie, please. Don't. I can't. You can't talk about it. I know. He's made sure of that." She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "But whatever he's got you doing, whatever he's holding over you, you need to know something. There are people who can help. People who can protect you." "Protect me?" His laugh was bitter. "From Vance. Do you have any idea what he's capable of? What he's done to people who crossed him?" "I know exactly what he's capable of, Marcus. That's why I'm giving you a chance. One chance. Before everything changes." Something in her voice made him look at her, really look at her for the first time. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Who are you, really?" Maggie held his gaze. Let him see just for a moment the steel beneath the grandmother mask. I'm someone who's going to stop him, with or without your help. But Marcus, she squeezed his arm, it would be so much easier with you. And I promise you on my honor, whatever happens, I will make sure you're protected. Marcus Webb stood frozen coffee cooling in his hands, caught between the fear that had ruled his life for years and the first hope he'd felt in longer than he could remember. Friday, he whispered. There's a shipment Friday. That's when it happens. I know about Friday. What I need to know is how. How is he getting the weapons out? What's the route? Who's receiving them on the other end? Marcus closed his eyes, made his choice. There's a truck, he said, registered as food supplies. It leaves from the loading dock at 2300 hours. But instead of going to the distribution center, it takes Highway 15 south to a private airfield. There's a plane waiting. No flight plan, no manifest, nothing official. And the buyer? I don't know his name, but I've heard Vance talk to him on the phone. He speaks with an accent. Russian maybe, or Eastern European. He calls Vance my American friend and laughs like everything's a joke. Maggie filed the information away. Pieces clicking into place. One more thing, Marcus. Where does Vance keep his records? His real records, not the ones he shows the company. Marcus hesitated. This was the line. Once crossed, there would be no going back. His office, he said finally. There's a safe behind the bookshelf. Combination is his brother's birthday. October 17th, 1984. He thinks no one knows, but I've watched him open it when he thought he was alone. His brother died in combat, Afghanistan. It's the only thing I've ever seen Vance show any emotion about. A brother lost to war, using that grief to hide evidence of arms dealing that would get more soldiers killed. The irony was sickening. Thank you, Marcus. Maggie stepped back, her demeanor shifting back to the harmless lunch lady. You did the right thing. Did I? He looked at her with haunted eyes. Because right now it feels like I just signed my own death warrant. No. Her voice was firm, certain. You just signed his. She turned and walked away, leaving Marcus Webb standing alone with his cold coffee and the terrifying, exhilarating realization that for the first time in years, he might actually be free. Thursday, 24 hours before the shipment. The tension at Blackwell was invisible to most, but Maggie could feel it in the air like electricity before a storm. Vance was more aggressive than usual, snapping at subordinates, doubling security patrols, making rounds at irregular intervals. He knew something was wrong. He just didn't know what. Maggie spent the day playing her role with extra care. Coffee runs, sandwich deliveries, polite conversations with employees who barely registered her existence. But behind the mask, she was positioning assets. A communication device hidden in the women's bathroom on the second floor, an emergency beacon in a ceiling tile near the loading dock, a secondary exit route mapped and memorized. By 6:00 p.m., everything was in place. She was cleaning tables in the cafeteria when Elena found her. Mrs. Hayes. The young woman's voice was barely a whisper. I need to talk to you, now. It's urgent. Maggie looked up, saw the fear in Elena's eyes, and felt her instincts snap to alert. What happened? He knows. Elena was shaking. Vance, he knows someone's been asking questions. He had a meeting with his security team this afternoon. I was delivering documents and I heard him say he's going to take care of the leak tomorrow, before the shipment. Maggie's mind raced. Did he mention any names? No, but Mrs. Hayes. Elena's voice cracked. He mentioned the cafeteria, said something about the old woman asking too many questions. So, he'd figured it out, or at least suspected. Where is Vance now? His office, planning something with his team. There's at least 6 of them in there. 6 men, armed, trained, on alert. And she was one 54-year-old woman with a coffee cart. At least that's what they thought. Elena, listen to me carefully. Maggie gripped her hands, held her gaze. I need you to leave the building, right now. Go home, pack a bag, and drive to this address. She pressed a card into Elena's palm, a safe house she'd established weeks ago. Wait there until you hear from me. What I don't understand. Mrs. Hayes, what's happening? Something I've been preparing for 11 months. Maggie pulled Elena into a hug, the kind a grandmother might give. You're a good person, Elena. You deserve better than what's happened to you here. And I promise, after tomorrow, Derek Vance will never hurt anyone again. She released her, stepped back. Now go. Don't look back. Don't talk to anyone. Just go. Elena stared at her, tears forming in her eyes. Who are you? Maggie smiled. The grandmother mask fell away entirely, replaced by something harder. Colder. The face of a woman who had spent nearly 3 decades in the shadows. I'm someone who should have stayed retired. Now run, honey. Run, and don't stop. Elena ran. Maggie watched her go, then turned and walked toward the security wing. 20 hours until the shipment. Time to end this. The security office was quiet at this hour, most of the day shift having gone home. But lights still burned behind Vance's door and shadows moved behind the frosted glass. Maggie didn't approach directly. That would be suicide. Instead, she made her way to the utility corridor that ran behind the office suite, a service entrance used by maintenance staff. Unremarkable, unmonitored. She'd identified this blind spot in week 3. The lock yielded to tools she'd hidden in her cleaning supplies months ago. The door opened without a sound. She moved through the darkness with the confidence of a woman who had mapped every inch of this building. Past the electrical panels, through the storage room, up a service ladder to the crawl space above Vance's office. The voices filtered up through the ceiling tiles, muffled but audible. Shipment leaves at 2300 tomorrow. No changes. We stick to the plan. Vance's voice, cold and commanding. What about the leak? I'll handle it personally, tomorrow afternoon, before the shipment. Make it look like an accident. And the others, the files the lunch lady might have seen. A pause. Then, burn them. Everything. Once that plane leaves tomorrow night, there's no evidence left. No witnesses. Just a tragic accident involving a confused old woman who wandered into a restricted area. Maggie listened, recording every word on a device no bigger than a button. They were going to kill her, stage it as an accident, and use her death to cover the weapons shipment that would arm terrorists and cost American lives. 28 years ago, news like this would have accelerated her heart rate, made her palms sweat, triggered the fight-or-flight response that kept humans alive. Now, she felt only a cold, calculated calm. They thought she was a confused old woman. They had no idea what they were dealing with. She made it back to her apartment at 11:47 p.m. Secure channel. Priority message. Operation moved tomorrow. 1400 hours. Vance planning to eliminate asset before shipment. Requesting backup team for emergency extraction of witnesses. Civilians Ruiz and Webb secured. I will proceed with primary mission regardless of backup status. If I don't check in by 2200 tomorrow, authorize full tactical response. Pause. Then one more line. It's been an honor. Stone out. She sent the message, then sat in the darkness of her apartment preparing herself for what came next. 54 years old. 11 months of watching and waiting. 28 years of service to a country that would never know her name. And tomorrow, one way or another, it would all end. She thought about the women Vance had harassed, the men he had threatened, the soldiers who would die if those weapons reached their destination. She thought about her fallen teammates, their faces preserved in memory, like photographs in a locked room of her mind. She thought about the photo Vance had dropped so carelessly, the children who deserved a world without men like him. Tomorrow she would give them that world, or die trying. Commander Margaret Stone closed her eyes, slowed her breathing, and let herself drift into the light sleep of someone who had learned to rest on the edge of battle. Tomorrow the trash was getting up, and Derek Vance would learn what that meant. Friday morning arrived with the kind of silence that precedes catastrophe. Maggie's eyes opened at 4:47 a.m., 13 minutes before her alarm. Her body remembered combat rhythms even after 3 years of retirement, the internal clock that had kept her alive through 28 years of operations that never officially happened. She lay still in the darkness, running through the day ahead. 1,400 hours, less than 10 hours away. By tonight, Derek Vance would be in federal custody or dead. The weapons would be secured or en route to terrorists, and she would be alive or she wouldn't. Those were the only variables that mattered. She rose dressed in her usual cafeteria uniform, secured her hair in its regulation ponytail. The woman who looked back from the bathroom mirror was Maggie Hayes, unremarkable lunch lady, 54 years old and counting down to retirement. But beneath the surface, Commander Stone was already at war. Her secure phone showed one message received at 3:22 a.m. Backup confirmed. Tactical team in position by 1300 hours. Coordinates received. You are not alone. Stone, bring him down. She deleted the message, destroyed the phone, and walked out into a morning that smelled like salt air and reckoning. The drive to Blackwell took 18 minutes. Maggie used every one of them to center herself, to push down the emotions that had no place in what was coming. Fear. She acknowledged it and set it aside. Anger. She felt it burning and banked the flame. Doubt. She examined it and found it wanting. 28 years. 47 missions. Countless enemies who had underestimated her. Derek Vance was just one more. She pulled into the employee parking lot at 6:15 a.m., 45 minutes before her shift. The extra time wasn't for preparation. It was for reconnaissance. Something felt wrong. The parking lot was too full for this hour. Security vehicles clustered near the main entrance. And standing by the front door, scanning every face that approached, was Derek Vance himself. Maggie's instincts screamed. He knew. Not suspected. Knew. She parked in her usual spot, gathered her things with the unhurried movements of a woman who had nothing to hide, walked toward the entrance with the shuffling gait she'd perfected over 11 months. Vance's eyes found her immediately. Mrs. Hayes, his voice carried across the parking lot. A word. Maggie stopped, adjusted her glasses, arranged her features into an expression of nervous confusion. Mr. Vance, is something wrong? He walked toward her, two of his security team falling into step behind him, close enough to grab her if she ran, far enough to give him room to maneuver. Tactical positioning. He'd done this before. We've had a security breach. He stopped 3 feet away, studying her face. Someone's been accessing restricted files, copying classified information, feeding it to people outside the company. That's terrible. Maggie clutched her purse tighter. Do you know who? I have my suspicions. His smile was thin and cold. You know anything about that Mrs. Hayes? Me. She let her voice quaver. I don't even know how to use the computers here, Mr. Vance. I just make sandwiches. He circled her slowly, the way a predator circles wounded prey. Funny thing is, the breach traces back to the cafeteria network. Someone used a service account to access files they had no business seeing. Maggie's mind raced. She'd been careful, so careful. Every digital footprint erased, every trace eliminated. But someone had seen her. Someone had talked. I don't understand any of that. She turned to face him, keeping her voice small. I'm just an old woman, Mr. Vance. I don't know anything about networks or security breaches. Maybe. He leaned close, his breath hot on her face. Or maybe you're not what you pretend to be. Maybe you've been watching me this whole time, waiting for your chance. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? His hand shot out, grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. I've been doing this a long time, Mrs. Hayes. I know when someone's playing a role. And you've been playing one since the day you walked in here. Pain lanced up her arm. Maggie let tears form in her eyes. Please, you're hurting me. Not yet. He released her, step back. But I will. If I find out you're the one who's been betraying this company, I will hurt you in ways you can't imagine. He turned and walked away, his security team following. Maggie stood alone in the parking lot, rubbing her arm, playing the part of a frightened old woman. But inside, she was calculating. He knew something. Not everything, or she'd already be dead, but enough to be suspicious, enough to be watching. The timeline had just accelerated. She couldn't wait until 1400 hours. She needed to move now before Vance figured out exactly who he was dealing with. Maggie walked into Blackwell Defense Contractors for the last time, and the clock began its final countdown. The cafeteria was empty at this hour, the breakfast rush still an hour away. Maggie moved through her opening routine with automatic precision, her mind working through contingencies. The backup team wouldn't be in position until 1300 hours, 5 hours from now. She was on her own until then. Maggie. The whisper came from the storage room. Marcus Webb's face appeared in the doorway, pale and terrified. Marcus, what are you doing here? They know. He grabbed her arm, pulled her into the storage room, shut the door behind them. Vance knows about the shipment. Knows someone tipped off the feds. He's moving everything up. Moving it up to when? Noon. He's pushing the whole operation forward. Says he's not taking any chances. Noon. 3 hours before backup arrived. How do you know this? I was in the security office this morning. Had to deliver some manifests. Marcus was shaking now. He was on the phone with someone. The buyer, I think. Telling him the schedule changed. Telling him they had to move fast because there was a leak. Did he say who the leak was? Marcus's eyes met hers. He said it was you, Maggie. He knows. I don't know how, but he knows you're not what you pretend to be. Did he say anything else? Just... Marcus swallowed hard. Just that he was going to handle you personally, before the shipment. Make sure you couldn't talk to anyone. So, it was happening. The moment she'd prepared for dreaded known was coming since the day she'd walked through these doors. Marcus, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to leave, right now. Go to this address. She pressed the same card she'd given Elena into his palm. Elena's already there. Wait with her until you hear from me. But what about you? I'll handle Vance. Marcus stared at her. You keep saying that. Like it's easy. Like he's not a trained killer with 6 men who would do anything he asked. He's a bully with delusions of competence. Maggie's voice hardened. I've taken down worse. Who are you? Marcus breathed. Really? Tell me the truth. She considered lying. Considered maintaining the cover that had served her for 11 months. But Marcus had risked everything to warn her. He deserved the truth. My name is Margaret Stone, Commander Margaret Stone, United States Navy, retired. I've been investigating the weapons trafficking operation at this company for almost a year. Marcus's face went white. Navy like SEALs. Like intelligence. Like the people who find targets before the SEALs get called. She gripped his shoulder. I know what I'm doing, Marcus, but I need you safe. I can't do what needs to be done if I'm worried about civilians getting caught in the crossfire. The crossfire, his voice cracked. There's going to be shooting. Maybe. Probably. She met his eyes. That's why you need to leave. Now. Before it starts. Marcus stood frozen for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay. Okay, I'll go. But Maggie... Commander. Whatever your name is. Maggie's fine. Be careful. Please. You're the first person in this whole damn place who ever treated me like a human being. I don't want you to die. I don't want that either. She managed a small smile. Now go. Don't stop for anything. He went. Maggie waited until she heard his car start in the parking lot, listened to the engine fade into distance. Then she pulled out the tools she'd hidden in the storage room weeks ago. Time to go to work. The cafeteria opened at 7:30 a.m. Maggie served breakfast with the same quiet efficiency she'd shown for 11 months, pouring coffee and handing out pastries while her eyes tracked every security guard who passed through. 3 at the main entrance, 2 patrolling the second floor, 1 stationed outside Vance's office. 6 men, all armed, all on alert. And somewhere in this building, Derek Vance was planning her death. At 9:15 a.m., her opportunity arrived. Mrs. Hayes. The voice belonged to Janet Torres, executive assistant to the CEO. 53 years old, married 2 grown children, desperately unhappy in a marriage she was too scared to leave. Mr. Patterson wants coffee in the conference room. The good coffee, not the regular stuff. Of course, dear. Maggie loaded her cart with the premium blend reserved for executives. I'll bring it right up. The conference room was on the 4th floor, right next to the executive suite, right above Vance's office. She pushed her cart into the elevator, pressed the button for 4, and felt the doors close behind her. In 90 seconds, she would be in position. In 90 seconds, everything would change. The conference room was empty when she arrived. Mr. Patterson and his senior staff were running late, caught up in a meeting that had gone long on the 3rd floor. Maggie had maybe 10 minutes alone. She worked fast, set up the coffee service with practiced hands while her eyes scanned the room. Emergency exit 15 feet away, ventilation shaft behind the ceiling panels. Window overlooking the loading dock 4 stories below. Then she moved to the corner to the spot she'd identified weeks ago during a wrong turn that had brought her to this floor. The ventilation grate came loose with the gentle pressure of a screwdriver hidden in her cart. Behind it, a space just large enough for the package she'd been carrying in her cleaning supplies. A communication beacon. Military-grade, untraceable. When activated, it would broadcast her location to the tactical team waiting outside. When she triggered this, there was no going back. Maggie paused her finger on the activation switch. 28 years, 47 missions. A lifetime of service to a country that would never know her name. And it all came down to this moment, this choice. She thought about Elena hiding in a safe house, terrified of a man who had made her life hell. She thought about Marcus, broken by debts and threats, finding his courage at the last possible moment. She thought about the weapons in that truck, the soldiers who would die if they reached their destination, the families who would get the knock on the door that changed everything. Her finger pressed the switch. The beacon activated with a soft pulse of light, then went dark. Invisible. Undetectable. But out there somewhere, a tactical team had just received her location. Backup was coming. Now she just had to survive until they arrived. The conference room door opened. Maggie spun her hand, dropping from the ventilation grate, her face rearranging into a mask of harmless confusion. Derek Vance stood in the doorway. Well, well. His smile was the smile of a man who had caught his prey. The lunch lady, all alone, so far from the cafeteria. Mr. Vance, she let her voice tremble. I was just setting up coffee for Mr. Patterson's meeting. Were you... He stepped into the room, closed the door behind him. Funny. I don't see any meeting on the schedule. Janet Torres asked me to. Janet Torres is in a meeting on 3. Has been all morning. He moved closer. Slow, predatory. You want to try again, Mrs. Hayes? Or should I call you something else? Maggie's heart pounded, but her face stayed neutral. I don't know what you mean. Let me help you then. He pulled a phone from his pocket, held up the screen. This was taken last night by one of my cameras, the ones you didn't know about. The image showed Maggie in the crawl space above his office. Clear. Unmistakable. Looks like someone was listening to private conversations. Vance's voice dropped to a growl. Want to explain what a cafeteria worker was doing in the ceiling above my office? Cover blown. Options limited. Time running out. Maggie made her choice. I was listening to you plan murder and treason. Her voice changed, dropping the grandmother affect, becoming hard and cold. I have recordings of everything. Your buyers, your routes, your contacts. All of it. Vance's expression flickered with something like surprise, then settled into something darker. There she is. He almost sounded pleased. I knew there was someone else under that pathetic disguise. So who are you really, FBI, CIA? Does it matter? It matters because I like to know who I'm killing. He reached behind him and suddenly there was a gun in his hand, pointed at her chest. So let's try this again. Who are you? Maggie looked at the gun, calculated distance angle her chances of reaching him before he pulled the trigger. Not good. Not good at all. My name is Margaret Stone, Commander, United States Navy, retired. Intelligence Support Activity. ISA. He laughed. The ghost hunters. They sent a 50-year-old grandmother to take me down. 54. And they sent me because I'm the best. The best at what? Making sandwiches. He gestured with the gun. Move. We're going somewhere private. somewhere we can have a real conversation. And if I refuse, then I shoot you here and explain to security that I caught a spy and had no choice." He shrugged. "Either way works for me." Maggie moved, not toward the door, not away from the gun, toward him. Vance's finger tightened on the trigger, but she was already inside his reach, her hand closing around his wrist, twisting, redirecting. The gun fired the shot going wide, punching through the window behind her. Then they were fighting. 28 years of close-quarters combat training against 38 years of arrogance and anger. Maggie knew within the first 3 seconds that she was outmatched in strength and speed. But she had experience, she had patience, and she had absolutely nothing to lose. Vance swung the gun toward her face. She ducked, drove her elbow into his solar plexus, felt the air whoosh out of him. His grip loosened, and she wrenched the weapon free, sent it skittering across the floor. He recovered fast. Too fast. His fist connected with her jaw, and the world exploded into stars. Maggie stumbled, tasted blood, kept moving. Distance. She needed distance. Not bad for a grandmother. Vance was breathing hard but smiling. "But you're old. Slow. You can't keep this up." He was right. She could feel it in her lungs, in the ache of her muscles, in the throbbing of her jaw. Time was not on her side. But she didn't need time. She just needed to survive until backup arrived. "You're a coward, Derek." She circled, keeping the conference table between them. "A bully who picks on women and threatens people smaller than you. That's not strength. That's weakness. Shut up. Your brother would be ashamed of you." His face twisted with rage. "Don't you dare. Declan Wright died outside Kandahar, a hero who gave his life for his country." She pressed harder, knowing she was playing with fire. "And here you are selling weapons to the people who killed him. What would he think if he could see you now?" Vance lunged across the table. Maggie was ready. She grabbed the coffee carafe, slammed it into his face as he came over. Hot liquid and broken glass. Vance screamed, clawed at his eyes, and she ran. The door, the hallway, the stairs. Behind her, she heard him roaring, heard boots pounding as his security team responded to the gunshot. The game had changed. No more hiding. No more pretending. Now it was survival. Maggie burst through the stairwell door, took the steps 3 at a time, her body remembering movements it hadn't made in years. 4th floor, 3rd floor, 2nd floor. Above her, the door slammed open. "Find her!" Vance's voice echoed down the stairwell. "Shoot to kill, I want that woman dead." 1st floor. Maggie hit the exit bar, exploded into the lobby. 3 security guards turned toward her, hands reaching for weapons. She didn't stop. Didn't slow. Grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall mount and threw it at the nearest guard's head as she sprinted for the front entrance. Sunlight. Fresh air. The parking lot spreading out before her. And then a hand grabbed her collar, yanked her backward, and she was falling. She hit the concrete hard enough to drive the breath from her lungs. Looked up to see a 4th guard standing over her weapon, drawn, face cold. "Don't move." More footsteps. More guards. 4 of them now forming a ring around her prone body. And then Derek Vance walked through the front doors, his face burned and bleeding, his eyes filled with murder. "You stupid old woman." He stood over her chest, heaving with rage. "You actually thought you could take me down, you..." Maggie spat blood onto the pavement. "I'm not finished yet." "Yes, you are." He pressed his boot onto her shoulder, grinding her into the concrete. "You're finished. Your investigation is finished. And in about 3 hours, those weapons will be on a plane to people who will use them to make your precious country burn." He leaned down, his burned face inches from hers. "Any last words, Commander?" Maggie looked up at him, at the 4 guards with their weapons trained on her, at the building full of people who had no idea what was happening. Then she smiled. "Yeah. Look up." Vance's eyes narrowed. "What?" The sound hit them before they saw it. A helicopter, black and unmarked, appearing over the rooftops like a messenger of judgment. Ropes unfurled from its belly and dark figures began their descent. The tactical team. Her beacon had worked. Vance's head snapped up, his face draining of color as he realized what was happening. No, No, it's not possible. It's too early. I triggered the beacon 20 minutes ago. Maggie's smile widened despite the blood on her teeth. They've been en route ever since. The first operator hit the ground, weapon up, voice cutting through the chaos. Federal agents, everyone down now. Vance's guards hesitated, caught between loyalty and self-preservation. That hesitation was all Maggie needed. She grabbed Vance's ankle, twisted, pulled. He went down hard, his head cracking against the pavement. Before he could recover, she was on top of him. Her knee in his back, his arm wrenched behind him at an angle that was one twist away from breaking. Stay down, Derek. Her voice was steady now, all pretense gone. Stay down like the trash you are. He struggled beneath her. This isn't over. You can't prove. I can prove everything. The recordings, the financial transfers, the buyer communications. All of it. She twisted his arm tighter, heard him gasp. You're done. Your operation is done. The only question is whether you spend the rest of your life in a federal prison or get handed over to the people whose weapons you've been selling. You wouldn't. Try me. The tactical team had secured the guards now. One of them approached, weapons still raised. Commander Stone, secure this man. Federal custody, multiple charges including weapons trafficking and conspiracy to commit murder. She stood, finally releasing Vance. And watch him. He's slippery. Vance was hauled to his feet, hands zip-tied behind his back. Blood ran from the cut on his forehead where he'd hit the pavement. This isn't over, he snarled. I have lawyers. I have connections. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Maggie stepped close to him, close enough to see the fear behind the bravado. You're right. I don't know who I'm dealing with. Her voice was quiet, cold. But you don't either. You looked at me and saw a lunch lady, a grandmother, trash to be pushed around. She leaned closer. You never saw the 28 years, the 47 missions, the things I've done that would make your little arms dealing look like a child's game. She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. You told me to stay down, Derek. You called me trash. And now here you are, in handcuffs, while I walk free. She stepped back. Take him. The tactical team dragged Vance toward a waiting vehicle. He struggled, cursed, made threats that everyone ignored. Maggie watched him go, feeling something loosen in her chest. It was over. 11 months of hiding. 11 months of insults and humiliations. 11 months of watching a predator prey on the innocent while she waited for her moment. It was finally over. Commander Stone. One of the operators approached, his expression professionally neutral. We need to secure the building. The shipment. Loading dock. Truck registered as food supplies leaves from Bay 7. Her mind snapped back to focus. Weapons are hidden in modified crates. Should be enough there to supply a small army. Copy that. He keyed his radio, relayed the information. What about inside any other hostiles? At least 2 more security personnel that I'm aware of. And there may be employees who were part of the operation. She thought about Marcus, about the desperation that had driven him to cooperate with Vance. One logistics supervisor, Marcus Webb, he was coerced. He's been cooperating with the investigation. We'll sort them out. The operator paused. You okay, ma'am? You're bleeding pretty good. Maggie touched her face, felt the swelling where Vance's fist had connected. I've had worse. I'm sure you have. There was respect in his voice now. We've all heard stories about ISA operators. Never thought I'd meet one in person. You still haven't. She managed a tired smile. I'm just a lunch lady. Remember. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Federal agents swarmed the building. Employees were evacuated, questions sorted into witnesses and suspects. The weapons shipment was discovered and secured, enough military-grade equipment to confirm every suspicion Maggie had developed over 11 months. She watched from a distance as the evidence was cataloged, photographed, loaded into federal vehicles. Watched as Derek Vance's carefully constructed empire crumbled around him. At some point, someone pressed a cup of coffee into her hands. She drank it without tasting it. At some point, someone cleaned the cut on her face, applied butterfly bandages. She barely felt it. At some point, the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. And then, finally, it was quiet. Maggie sat on the hood of a federal vehicle watching the last of the cleanup crews finish their work. The coffee in her hands had gone cold hours ago. Her phone buzzed. A message from the safe house. Elena. We saw the news. Is it really over? Maggie typed back. It's over. You're safe. Both of you. A pause. Then, thank you for everything. I don't know how we can ever repay you. Maggie smiled, something genuine warming in her chest for the first time all day. You already have. Stay safe. I'll be in touch. She pocketed the phone, looked up at the building where she'd spent 11 months of her life pretending to be someone she wasn't. Tomorrow, the headlines would talk about the bust. Federal agents breaking a weapons trafficking ring. Arrests made terrorism prevented. Her name wouldn't appear anywhere. It never did. That was the job. That was the life she'd chosen. But somewhere out there, Elena and Marcus were safe. The weapons were secured. And Derek Vance was finally facing the consequences of his choices. That had to be enough. It had to be. Maggie slid off the hood, tossed her cold coffee into a nearby trash can, and walked toward the setting sun. The mission was over. But she had a feeling her story was just beginning. The sunset had barely faded when Maggie's phone rang. She was still walking through the parking lot, her body aching from the fight with Vance, her mind already drifting toward thoughts of a hot shower and a bed that wasn't part of a cover identity. The number on the screen made her stop. Washington, her old handler, a man who only called when the world was about to get worse. Stone. Commander, we have a problem. His voice was tight, controlled, the voice of someone delivering news that would change everything. The shipment is secure. Vance is in custody. What problem could there possibly be? Vance talked. Maggie felt something cold settle in her stomach. Already it's been 4 hours. He started talking the moment the cuffs went on. Couldn't wait to make a deal. A pause. Commander, he wasn't the mastermind. He was middle management. Someone else was running this operation, and they're still out there. The parking lot suddenly felt very empty, very exposed. Who? That's the problem. Vance gave us a code name. Architect. Says this person has been running weapons operations out of defense contractors for over a decade. Blackwell was just one of half a dozen companies being used. And we have no idea who the architect is. We have one lead. Another pause, longer this time. Commander, this person knew about you. Knew your cover identity, your mission parameters, your communication protocols. They've been feeding Vance information for weeks. The cold in Maggie's stomach turned to ice. Someone inside the intelligence community. That's what we're thinking. Someone with access to classified operations. Someone who knew ISA had an asset at Blackwell. How high? We don't know yet. Could be anyone from a junior analyst to... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. What do you need me to do? For now, stay alive. We're pulling you out, bringing you to a secure location while we figure out how deep this goes. A third pause. Commander, there's something else. Something Vance said that you need to know. Tell me. He said the architect gave him specific instructions about you, not just to watch you, not just to expose you. The handler's voice dropped. To kill you. Today, before the shipment, because the architect knew you were the only one who could stop what's coming next. What's coming next? We don't know. But whatever it is, it's bigger than one weapons shipment, bigger than anything Vance was involved in. He exhaled. Commander, you need to get somewhere safe, right now. The architect knows you're still alive. They know their operation just got blown. And they're not going to let that stand. Maggie turned, scanning the parking lot with new eyes. Every shadow suddenly threatening. Every parked car a potential ambush. Where's my extraction point? We're sending coordinates now, 20 minutes out. A team will meet you there. Copy that. And Commander, watch your back. We don't know who we can trust anymore. The line went dead. Maggie stood alone in the darkness, her phone clutched in her hand, her mind racing through implications and possibilities. Someone inside the intelligence community had sold her out. Someone with enough access to know about classified ISA operations. Someone who was still out there, still watching, still planning. And whatever they were planning, she had just become the primary obstacle. Her phone buzzed again. Coordinates, a warehouse district 12 miles away. 20 minutes. She started walking toward her car faster now, every sense on high alert. She didn't see the black SUV until it was too late. It came out of nowhere, tires screaming against pavement, headlights off. Maggie dove to the side, felt the rush of air as the vehicle missed her by inches. The SUV skidded to a stop. Doors flew open. 4 men emerged, moving with military precision. Not Vance's people. These were professionals. Commander Stone. The lead man's voice was calm, almost pleasant. The architect sends their regards. They're disappointed you survived the day. Maggie scrambled to her feet, calculating odds. 4 armed men, professional training, no backup within 20 minutes. Who is the architect? You'll never find out. He raised his weapon. Goodbye, Commander. The shot came from behind him. The lead man's head snapped forward and he crumpled without a sound. Before his body hit the ground, 2 more shots rang out. 2 more men fell. The 4th man spun, searching for the shooter, and Maggie moved. She closed the distance in 3 steps, grabbed his gun arm, twisted. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the air. She drove her palm into his nose, felt cartilage crunch, followed with an elbow to the temple. He went down. 4 men. 4 seconds. The odds had shifted. Commander Stone. A figure emerged from the darkness. Female mid-30s, moving with the confident grace of someone who had spent years in tactical operations. Who are you? Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Counterintelligence. She lowered her weapon. We've been tracking the architect for 3 years. When we heard about the Blackwell bust, we knew they'd make a move. You've been watching me. We've been watching everyone connected to this case. Chen stepped over one of the fallen men, checking for signs of life. The architect has people everywhere. CIA, NSA, Pentagon. We didn't know who to trust, so we trusted no one. Smart. Survival. Same as you. Chen looked up. Commander, we need to talk, but not here, not in the open. My extraction team. Compromised. The coordinates you received would have led you into another ambush. Chen's expression was grim. The architect has assets inside your chain of command. Your handler might be one of them. Maggie felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Everything she thought she knew, everyone she thought she could trust, suddenly uncertain. How do I know you're not one of them? You don't. Chen met her eyes. But I just saved your life and I'm about to tell you things that could get me killed. That has to count for something. A long moment passed. Maggie studied the younger woman's face, looking for tells, for signs of deception. She saw only exhaustion and determination. Talk. The architect isn't just running weapons. They're building something. A network of compromised assets across every major defense contractor in the country. Blackwell was a test run. Proof of concept. Proof of concept for what? For taking control. Chen's voice dropped. Think about it. Every major weapons system, every classified technology, every military secret, all flowing through private contractors. And if someone controlled those contractors, they'd control the weapons, the information, everything. Everything. And we think the architect is about to make their move. Something big, something that's been years in the planning. When we don't know exactly. But Vance was supposed to complete his shipment today. When that didn't happen, the architect lost a key piece of their plan. They're going to have to adjust, regroup. That gives us a window. A window to do what? Chen reached into her jacket, pulled out a file. We've been building a case. 3 years of surveillance, intercepted communications, financial trails. But we've never been able to identify the architect. Never been able to get close enough to see their face. And you think I can? I think you already have. Chen opened the file. These are the people Vance communicated with over the past 6 months. His handlers, his contacts, the people who gave him orders. Maggie took the file, began flipping through pages. Names, photographs, intelligence assessments. Most of them were strangers, but one face made her blood run cold. That's not possible. I thought you might say that. Maggie stared at the photograph. A face she knew, a face she had trusted for over a decade. General Harrison, Director of Intelligence Support Activity. Her voice was barely a whisper. My commanding officer. He signed off on this mission. He signed off on a lot of missions. Chen's voice was gentle, understanding. Missions that failed at critical moments. Missions where assets were compromised. Missions that should have succeeded, but didn't. You're saying he's been sabotaging us for how long? We think at least 15 years. Maybe longer. Chen took the file back. He's the architect commander, and you just destroyed one of his key operations. He's not going to let that stand. Maggie's mind reeled. General Harrison, the man who had recruited her into ISA, the man who had trusted her with the most sensitive operations in the intelligence community, the man who had sent her to Blackwell. He knew I would find out about Vance. He knew I would stop the shipment. We think he was counting on Vance killing you before that happened. When that failed, he had backup plans in place. Chen gestured to the 4 bodies on the ground. But you're harder to kill than he expected. He trained me himself. He knows exactly how hard I am to kill. Maybe that's why he wanted you at Blackwell. Get you far from Washington, isolated, vulnerable. Easier to eliminate when the time came. It made a terrible kind of sense. The assignment that had seemed like a favor, one last mission for a retired operative. The handler who had pushed her to take it. The resources that had been slightly insufficient, the backup that had arrived slightly late. All orchestrated, all designed to end with her death. What do you need me to do? We need proof, hard evidence that Harrison is the architect. Chen met her eyes. And you're the only one who can get it. How? Harrison is hosting a private gathering tonight. Senior officials, defense contractors, intelligence leadership. Very exclusive, very secure. And very much a place I'm not invited. Actually, you are. Chen smiled for the first time. You just don't know it yet. Harrison put you on the guest list 3 weeks ago. We think he was planning to use the event to publicly discredit you, make you look unstable, lay the groundwork for your convenient suicide. Suicide? That's what the report would say. Troubled veteran traumatized by years of service takes her own life after making wild accusations against respected officials. Chen's smile faded. It's elegant, efficient, very much his style. Maggie thought about the past 11 months, the humiliations, the dismissals, the way she had been made to feel small and useless and forgettable, all part of the plan, all designed to break her before the final blow. He underestimated me. He underestimated a lot of people. That's going to be his downfall. What's the plan? Chen pulled out a tablet, began pulling up schematics and schedules. The gathering starts at 2100 hours. High security, but we have assets inside. Your job is to get Harrison alone, get him to admit what he's done. And if he doesn't, then we go to plan B. Chen's expression hardened. Harrison has a secure server in his private office. Every communication, every transaction, every order he's ever given. If we can access that server, we have everything we need. Breaking into a general's private office during a secure event, no pressure. Commander, you spent 11 months pretending to be a cafeteria worker. I think you can handle one party. Despite everything, Maggie felt a smile tug at the corner of her mouth. You've done your research. I've been watching you for 3 years. I know exactly what you're capable of. Chen paused. And I know what you've sacrificed, what you've given up. This job takes everything from us, and most of the time no one even knows our names. That's the job. It doesn't have to be. Chen held out her hand. Help me take down Harrison. Help me end this, and maybe for once the right people will know what you've done. Maggie looked at the offered hand, thought about General Harrison, the man who had shaped her career, trained her skills, sent her into danger more times than she could count. The man who had been selling her out the entire time. She took Chen's hand. Tell me about this party. 3 hours later, Maggie stood in front of a mirror she barely recognized. The reflection showed a woman transformed. The gray cafeteria uniform replaced by an elegant black dress. The simple ponytail exchanged for a sophisticated updo. makeup applied with a professional hand covering the bruises and cuts from her fight with Vance. She looked like what she was supposed to be, a distinguished military officer attending a prestigious event. Not a lunch lady. Not an invisible woman. Commander Margaret Stone, back from the shadows. Chen appeared behind her, checking her own appearance. You clean up nice? I hate dresses. Join the club. Chen adjusted her earpiece. Comms are live. You'll hear me throughout the event, and I'll hear everything you say. And if things go wrong, tactical team is standing by, but they're outside the perimeter. Inside, you're on your own. Story of my life. The drive to Harrison's estate took 40 minutes. Maggie spent the time reviewing everything Chen had told her, memorizing floor plans, escape routes, the locations of security cameras and guard posts. The estate itself was a monument to power and privilege. 3 stories of colonial architecture surrounded by manicured grounds and enough security to protect a small nation. This was where Harrison played host, where he gathered the powerful and the influential, where he spun his web. Tonight, Maggie was going to burn it down. The valet took her car with practiced efficiency. A security checkpoint examined her invitation, verified her identity, waved her through. So far, so good. The main hall was crowded with exactly the kind of people Maggie had spent her career avoiding. Politicians with practiced smiles, generals with chests full of medals, defense executives with pockets full of contracts. The corrupt and the compromised gathered together under one roof, and somewhere among them, General Harrison. Commander Stone. The voice came from her left. Maggie turned to find a face she recognized from Chen's file. Colonel Douglas Reeves, Army Intelligence, suspected of being one of Harrison's inner circle. What a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect to see you here. Colonel Reeves. She accepted his handshake, noted the slight tremor in his grip. Nervous. Interesting. The general was kind enough to extend an invitation. Was he now? Reeves's eyes flickered with something that might have been concern. I wasn't aware you two were close. We go back a long way. Yes, I suppose you do. He released her hand, stepped back slightly. If you'll excuse me, I see someone I need to speak with. He walked away quickly, pulling out his phone as he went. Chen's voice crackled in her ear. He's texting someone, probably warning Harrison that you've arrived. Good. Let him wonder why I'm here. Just remember, we need evidence. Don't let your emotions get the better of you. Easy for her to say. She hadn't spent 28 years following a man who was selling out his country. Maggie moved through the crowd, accepting champagne she didn't drink, making small talk she didn't mean. Every interaction was a performance, every smile a mask. After 11 months as a cafeteria worker, this felt almost easy. She found Harrison in the library. He was holding court among a group of senior officials, his silver hair perfectly groomed, his bearing commanding and confident, the very picture of military excellence, the picture of a traitor. Their eyes met across the room. Something flickered in his expression, quickly suppressed. Surprise. Calculation. Perhaps a hint of fear. Commander Stone. He separated from his group, crossed the room with the easy confidence of a man who owned it. I was beginning to think you wouldn't make it. I almost didn't. Someone tried to kill me on my way here. How terrible. His concern was pitch perfect, utterly convincing. Are you all right? I'm fine. They weren't. A flicker of something in his eyes. Disappointment, irritation. Well, I'm glad you're safe. We should talk, you and I. Catch up on old times. He gestured toward a door at the back of the library. My private study, much quieter than out here. A trap. Obviously. But it was also an opportunity. Lead the way, General. The study was exactly what she expected. Expensive furniture walls lined with books, a massive desk dominating the center of the room, and presumably the secure server that held all of Harrison's secrets. Harrison closed the door behind them, and suddenly the noise of the party disappeared. Just the two of them alone. So, he moved to the bar, poured 2 glasses of whiskey. You've had quite a day. You could say that. The Blackwell operation. Very impressive work. You stopped a major weapons trafficking network, captured a dangerous criminal. He held out a glass. You should be proud. Maggie didn't take the glass. Should I? Of course. It's exactly the kind of work you were trained for. He set the rejected glass on the desk, sipped from his own. Although I have to admit, I'm surprised you're here. After everything that happened today, I would have expected you to be resting, recovering. I don't rest well when there are loose ends. Loose ends. Vance talked general. He told us everything. The slightest pause, the barest hesitation. I'm not sure what you mean. I mean the architect, the network, the plan that's been building for 15 years. Maggie stepped closer. I mean you. The mask didn't slip. Harrison's expression remained perfectly composed, mildly curious. Margaret, you've been through a lot today. The stress, the violence, it can affect anyone's judgment. Don't. I'm serious. I've seen it happen to the best operators. The paranoia sets in, you start seeing enemies everywhere. I said don't. Her voice cut like a blade. Don't try to gaslight me. Don't try to make me doubt myself. I know exactly what you are. Harrison studied her for a long moment. Then slowly his expression changed. The mask fell away. What remained was something cold, something calculating, something that had been hiding behind the facade of a hero for decades. You always were too smart for your own good. He set down his whiskey, his movements suddenly predatory. That's why I recruited you, you know. That brilliant mind, that instinct for the truth. I knew you'd be valuable. Valuable until I got too close. Everyone becomes a liability eventually. The question is managing when and how. He circled around the desk, putting it between them. Blackwell was supposed to be your exit, a quiet end to a distinguished career. Vance would eliminate you, the shipment would go through, and the world would keep spinning. But I didn't die. No, you didn't. Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. You never did know when to stay down, Margaret. It's your greatest strength, and your fatal flaw. Why? The question burned in her throat. 28 years I gave you. 28 years of service, of sacrifice, of believing in what we were doing. Why would you betray all of it? Betray? He laughed, a cold and mirthless sound. I didn't betray anything. I woke up. I saw the truth that everyone else refuses to acknowledge. What truth? That the system is broken. That the people we serve don't deserve our loyalty. That the only way to make real change is to take control. His voice rose with conviction. Do you know how many times I watched good operators die because politicians made stupid decisions? How many missions failed because bureaucrats were too afraid to act? So you decided to become the enemy. I decided to become something better, something that could actually make a difference. He spread his hands. The weapons, the contractors, the network I've built. It's not about money, Margaret. It's about power. The power to shape the future instead of just reacting to it. By selling weapons to terrorists, by getting American soldiers killed. Casualties in a larger war, acceptable losses for a greater goal. His expression hardened. You've made acceptable losses decisions before. Don't pretend otherwise. I've made decisions that cost lives. I've lived with those decisions every day since. Maggie's voice shook with fury. But I never sold out my own people. I never betrayed everything I swore to protect. Because you still believe in the fairy tale. The noble warrior serving the righteous nation. Harrison shook his head. Wake up, Margaret. There are no righteous nations. There are only interests, and I decided to serve my own. You decided to become a traitor. I decided to become free. He moved fast for his age, reaching into his desk drawer. Maggie was faster. She vaulted the desk, caught his arm before it cleared. The drawer twisted hard. Something clattered to the floor. A gun. She kicked it away, drove her elbow into his solar plexus. Harrison doubled over, gasping. You're not free! She grabbed his collar, forced him upright. You're just another monster who forgot that the rules apply to everyone. The rules. He spat blood on the carpet. Do you know what the rules got me? 3 Purple Hearts and a daughter who died because the VA couldn't be bothered to give her proper treatment. A wife who left because I was never home. A life spent serving people who see us as disposable. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, old and deep. You lost someone. I lost everything, and no one cared. No one remembered, so I decided to stop caring about them. He laughed bitterly. You want to know the funny part? I didn't start as a traitor. I started as a reformer. I thought I could change things from inside, but the system doesn't change. It just grinds down everyone who tries. So you became what you hated. I became what was necessary. He met her eyes. And so will you, eventually. Everyone does. The only question is when. No. Maggie tightened her grip. I've spent my whole life watching people make that excuse, justifying every betrayal, every cruelty, every compromise as necessary. But it's not. It's a choice. You chose to become this. And what did your choices get you? 28 years of service and a job making sandwiches. His smile was vicious. At least I'll be remembered. At least I mattered. You mattered to the people you got killed. You mattered to the families who will never know why their loved ones died. She released him, stepped back. That's your legacy, General. That's what you'll be remembered for. By who you think anyone will believe you? A 54-year-old woman who spent the last year pretending to be a lunch lady. He straightened, regaining his composure. I have allies in every agency, resources you can't imagine. Even if you walk out of here tonight, you'll be dead within a week. Maybe. She pulled out her phone, pressed a button. But they'll still have this. Harrison's face went pale. What did you do? Everything you just said. Recorded and transmitted to FBI counterintelligence. She smiled. Agent Chen sends her regards. You? The door burst open. Armed agents flooded the room. Weapons raised voices shouting commands. Harrison stood frozen, his empire crumbling around him. General David Harrison, you're under arrest for treason, conspiracy to commit murder, and weapons trafficking. Chen stepped through the door, her expression hard with satisfaction. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. They put him in handcuffs, the same kind of handcuffs they'd put on Vance hours earlier. Father and son in betrayal, if not in blood. As they led him away, Harrison turned back to Maggie. This isn't over. I have contingencies, plans you can't imagine. I'm sure you do. She met his gaze without flinching. But here's the thing about plans, General. They only work if you're free to execute them, and you're not going to be free for a very long time. They took him away. Maggie stood alone in the study, surrounded by the evidence of Harrison's downfall. The secure server hummed quietly in the corner, ready to surrender its secrets. Chen appeared beside her. We did it. We actually did it. We did. How do you feel? Maggie considered the question. How did she feel? 28 years of service. A mentor revealed as a monster. A lifetime of certainties shattered in a single night. Tired, she said finally. I feel tired. That's fair. Chen put a hand on her shoulder. For what it's worth, you just saved a lot of lives. The network Harrison built, the operations he was planning, they would have cost thousands. I know. And the people who need to know will know what you did. Your name won't be classified this time. Maggie shook her head. I don't need recognition. I just need it to be over. Is it ever over for people like us? It was a good question. One Maggie didn't have an answer for. Outside, sirens wailed and flashlights swept across the estate grounds. The party was over. The masks were off. And somewhere in the chaos, a 54-year-old woman who had been called trash walked out into the night, knowing she had changed everything. The storm had broken. Now came the reckoning. The federal building smelled like stale coffee and bureaucracy. Maggie had been sitting in the same uncomfortable chair for 3 hours, answering questions she had already answered twice, explaining events she was still processing herself. Across the table, a young FBI agent with earnest eyes and a fresh haircut flipped through pages of notes. So, just to clarify, Commander Stone, You had no prior knowledge that General Harrison was the architect. No. Even though he was your commanding officer for over a decade, he was good at what he did. Maggie's voice was flat with exhaustion. That's how he survived this long. That's how he fooled everyone. Including you. Including me. The agent made another note. Maggie watched his pen move across the paper and felt something hollow open up in her chest. 28 years. She had given Harrison 28 years of absolute loyalty, followed his orders without question, trusted him with her life more times than she could count, and all of it had been a lie. Commander Stone, the agent's voice pulled her back. Are you all right? I'm fine. You don't look fine. Then stop looking. A knock at the door interrupted whatever the agent was about to say. Chen entered, her expression urgent. We need her. Now. We're not finished with the debrief. It's finished. Chen's voice left no room for argument. Director's orders. The agent started to protest, then saw something in Chen's eyes that made him close his notebook instead. Commander Stone, thank you for your cooperation. Maggie stood her joints protesting after 3 hours of sitting. What's happening? Chen waited until they were in the hallway away from listening ears. Harrison's server. We cracked it an hour ago. Her voice was low, tense. It's worse than we thought. Much worse. How much worse? 14 defense contractors compromised, 67 individual assets across 12 agencies, and a timeline for something called Operation Blackout that was scheduled to begin next month. What's Operation Blackout? We're still piecing it together, but it looks like a coordinated attack on military communication systems, satellites, ground stations, emergency networks, everything that keeps our forces connected and coordinated. Maggie felt cold settle into her bones. That would cripple our entire military infrastructure. For at least 72 hours, maybe longer. Chen stopped walking, turned to face her. And during those 72 hours, Harrison had arranged for weapons shipments to reach hostile actors across 3 continents. By the time we restored communications, the damage would be catastrophic. How close were they? 3 weeks, maybe less. Chen's expression was grim. You didn't just stop a weapons shipment, Commander. You stopped the beginning of World War III. The weight of it pressed down on Maggie's shoulders. All those months at Blackwell, making sandwiches, being humiliated, playing invisible. She had known the mission was important. She hadn't known it was this important. What happens now? Now we clean house. Every name on Harrison's list gets investigated. Every asset gets neutralized. Every piece of the network gets dismantled. That's going to take months, years maybe. It's going to take however long it takes. Chen started walking again. But that's not why I pulled you out of the debrief. There's someone who wants to see you. Who? Chen didn't answer. Just led her through a maze of corridors to a secure conference room on the 5th floor. Inside, a man sat alone at a long table. Older, distinguished with the bearing of someone who had spent decades in positions of power. Director William Garrett, head of the FBI, one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the country. Commander Stone. He rose as she entered, extended his hand. Please sit down. Maggie shook his hand, lowered herself into a chair across from him. Chen remained standing by the door. Director Garrett, I wasn't expecting... I know, and I apologize for the circumstances of this meeting. He sat back down, folded his hands on the table. I wanted to thank you personally. What you did over the past 24 hours. It's extraordinary. I was doing my job. You were doing far more than your job. You exposed a traitor who had been operating for 15 years. You prevented a weapons transfer that would have armed our enemies. And you stopped an attack that could have devastated our military capabilities. I had help. You had Agent Chen, who tells me that without you, none of this would have been possible. He paused, studied her face. How are you holding up? The question caught her off guard. In her experience, directors didn't ask how you were holding up. They asked for reports, for results, for assurances that the mission was complete. Honestly, I don't know yet. That's understandable. Finding out that someone you trusted, someone you followed for nearly 3 decades was a traitor. He shook his head. That's not something you just process overnight. No, it's not. I want you to know that we're going to take care of you. Whatever you need, whatever support, it's yours. What I need is to understand how this happened. Maggie leaned forward. Harrison didn't build this network overnight. He had help, resources, protection. How did he operate for 15 years without anyone noticing? Garrett's expression darkened. That's what we're trying to figure out. His position gave him access to compartmentalized information. He knew what was being investigated and when. He could steer resources away from anything that got too close. So he was always one step ahead. Until Blackwell. Garrett paused. Do you know why Harrison sent you to that particular assignment? To kill me. Make it look like an accident. That was part of it. But we found communications on his server. He had a specific reason for choosing you. Garrett pulled out a tablet, slid it across the table. Read this. Maggie picked up the tablet. An email dated 6 months ago from Harrison to an unknown recipient. Stone is becoming a liability. Her instincts are too sharp, her loyalty too absolute. If she ever looks in the wrong direction, she'll see what others have missed. The Blackwell assignment will solve both problems. Vance will eliminate her and she'll die believing she served honorably. A fitting end for a faithful soldier. Maggie read it twice. 3 times. He thought my loyalty was a liability. He thought your integrity was a threat. Garrett took the tablet back. In his world, people who couldn't be bought or corrupted were dangerous. You were dangerous because you actually believed in what you were doing. And that belief made me a target. That belief is what saved thousands of lives. Garrett stood, moved to the window. Commander, I'm going to ask you something and I want you to think carefully before you answer. What is it? We're going to spend the next several years cleaning up Harrison's mess, rooting out his network, rebuilding trust, fixing the damage he's done to our intelligence community. He turned to face her. I want you to be part of that process. In what capacity? Whatever capacity you want. Investigator, advisor, trainer. He paused. Or something more. More, we're creating a new unit, a team dedicated to identifying and eliminating internal threats. People who operate outside normal channels, who can go places and see things that traditional investigators can't. His eyes met hers. We need someone to lead it. Someone with your experience, your instincts, your integrity. Maggie sat in silence, processing the offer. 48 hours ago, she had been a cafeteria worker. Invisible. Forgotten. Waiting for a mission to end so she could return to her garden and her book club and her quiet retirement. Now she was being offered a chance to reshape the entire intelligence community. Can I think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. Garrett returned to his seat. But Commander, whatever you decide, I want you to know something. What you did matters. The people whose lives you saved will never know your name, but you'll know. And that has to count for something. It does. Maggie stood. It has to. She left the conference room with Chen at her side and a weight on her shoulders that she wasn't sure she could carry, but she was going to try. The safe house was quiet when Maggie arrived. She had called ahead, asked Chen to let Elena and Marcus know she was coming. Wanted to see them before the federal bureaucracy swallowed them up for debriefing and witness protection and all the other processes that would define their lives for the foreseeable future. Elena opened the door before Maggie could knock. Mrs. Hayes. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was smiling. I mean, Commander Stone, I don't know what to call you. Maggie is fine. Maggie. Elena threw her arms around her, held on tight. Thank you. Thank you so much. Maggie returned the embrace, felt something loosen in her chest. This was why. This was always why. You're safe now. Both of you. Because of you. Elena pulled back, wiped her eyes. We saw the news. About General Harrison. About everything. How much do you know? Enough to know that you saved a lot more than just us. Marcus appeared in the doorway behind Elena, his face haggard but lighter than Maggie had ever seen it. They're saying you stopped some kind of attack, something that could have killed thousands. I had help. You always say that. Elena shook her head. But we both know the truth. You did this. You stopped Vance. You stopped Harrison. You stopped all of it. Maggie didn't know what to say. Praise had always made her uncomfortable. She was trained to operate in shadows, to do the work without recognition, to disappear when the mission was done. But this felt different. These two people looking at her with gratitude and awe, they weren't officials or agents or superiors. They were just people. People whose lives she had changed. Can I come in? They sat together in the small living room drinking coffee that Marcus insisted on making. The conversation wandered through the events of the past 2 days, filling in gaps, answering questions, processing trauma. What happens to us now? Elena asked finally. Marcus and me, do we go back to our normal lives? That depends. Maggie set down her coffee cup. Marcus, you cooperated with the investigation. You provided crucial information that helped stop the weapons shipment. The FBI is recommending leniency. Relief flooded Marcus's face. I was so scared. I thought they'd put me in prison. You made mistakes, but you also made choices when it mattered. Maggie met his eyes. That counts. It has to count. And me. Elena's voice was small. I didn't do anything except be afraid. You survived. You came to me when you could have stayed silent. You trusted someone you barely knew because your instincts told you it was the right thing to do. Maggie reached out, took Elena's hand. That's not nothing. That's everything. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. I keep thinking about all those women. The ones Vance hurt before me. The ones who quit or got scared away or... They're going to be contacted. All of them. Their stories are going to be heard, documented, validated. Maggie squeezed her hand. Derek Vance is never going to hurt anyone again. Is it true? Marcus asked. What they're saying about him, that he's going to prison for the rest of his life. Multiple federal charges. Weapons trafficking, conspiracy, attempted murder. The evidence is overwhelming. Good. Elena's voice hardened with an anger Maggie hadn't heard before. I hope he rots. He'll have plenty of time to think about what he did. Maggie paused. Speaking of which, there's something I need to do. Someone I need to see. Vance. Yes. Why? Elena's confusion was evident. You already beat him. Why would you want to see him again? It was a good question. One Maggie had been asking herself since she'd made the decision. Because I need him to understand. Not for his sake. For mine. Elena and Marcus exchanged glances but didn't argue. Some things couldn't be explained. They just had to be done. The federal detention center was a fortress of concrete and razor wire. Maggie passed through 3 security checkpoints, surrendered her phone and her dignity to a series of pat-downs and metal detectors, and finally arrived at a small interview room where Derek Vance sat waiting. He looked smaller than she remembered. The arrogance that had defined him at Blackwell was gone, replaced by something hollow and diminished. His face still bore the burns from the coffee she had thrown, scabbed over and healing badly. Commander Stone. His voice was hoarse, unused. I wondered if you'd come. I almost didn't. But you did. Why? Maggie sat down across from him, studied the face of the man who had called her trash, who had humiliated her in front of hundreds of people, who had planned to kill her. I've been asking myself that same question. And I think I needed to see you like this, without the uniform, without the power, without the people who followed your orders out of fear. She leaned back. I needed to see who you really were underneath all of it. Vance laughed, a bitter and broken sound. And what do you see? A coward, a bully who never learned that real strength doesn't come from making other people feel small. Is that all? No. Maggie paused, considering her next words carefully. I also see someone who was in pain. Someone who lost a brother and never figured out how to carry that grief. Someone who took their trauma and turned it into a weapon against everyone around them. Something flickered in Vance's eyes. Surprise. Pain. The ghost of the person he might have been. You knew about Declan. I knew about everything. That's what I do. Did you know that I was with him when he died? Vance's voice cracked. I was supposed to protect him. He was my little brother, and I was supposed to keep him safe, and I couldn't. I held him while he bled out, and there was nothing I could do. I'm sorry. Are you... His eyes hardened. Are you sorry? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you destroyed my life without losing a minute of sleep. You destroyed your own life, Derek. The moment you decided to sell weapons to people who would use them to kill American soldiers. The moment you decided to hurt women who worked for you. The moment you chose to become exactly the kind of monster that took your brother. The words hit him like physical blows. Maggie watched his face crumble, watched the walls fall away. I never thought of it that way. I know you didn't. That's the problem. She stood. You're going to have a lot of time to think now. A lot of years in a cell with nothing but your own mind. And I hope for your sake that you use that time. I hope you figure out how you became this. I hope you find a way to be something different. Why do you care? After everything I did to you. Maggie paused at the door, looked back at him. Because I spent 28 years watching people choose who they want to be. Some choose to become better. Some choose to become worse. And I've learned that the choice is always there right up until the end. She opened the door. You called me trash, Derek. You told me to stay down. And I'm still standing. The question is whether you'll ever find the strength to stand up yourself. She walked out, leaving him alone with the weight of his choices. Behind her, she heard something she hadn't expected. A sob. Raw and broken and real. Maybe there was hope for Derek Vance after all. Maybe not. Either way, it wasn't her problem anymore. She had other battles to fight. The news broke 3 days later. Maggie watched from her temporary apartment as the story unfolded across every network. General David Harrison, decorated veteran trusted leader, exposed as a traitor. Derek Vance, security chief, arrested for weapons trafficking and attempted murder. Blackwell defense contractors under federal investigation. A web of corruption spanning 15 years and 14 companies. The anchors used words like unprecedented and shocking and devastating. They interviewed experts who explained what the exposed network could have accomplished. They showed graphics of the weapons that would have reached enemy hands, the attacks that would have been launched, the soldiers who would have died. They didn't mention her name. Chen had warned her that would happen. Some of the details were too classified to share publicly. The involvement of ISE, the specifics of her mission, the methods she had used, all of it remained in the shadows where it had always lived. But the people who mattered knew. Director Garrett had made sure of that. Her phone buzzed with a text from Chen. Turn on Channel 7. You need to see this. Maggie switched channels, found a press conference in progress. A woman stood at the podium, flanked by officials from half a dozen agencies. Today, we are announcing a new initiative in counterintelligence. A dedicated unit focused on identifying and eliminating internal threats to our national security. The woman paused, looked directly into the camera. This unit will be led by one of the most distinguished intelligence operatives in American history. A woman who spent 30 years serving her country in the shadows, whose actions over the past week prevented one of the most devastating attacks in our nation's history. Maggie's breath caught. Commander Margaret Stone has agreed to come out of retirement to lead this critical effort. Her experience, her integrity, and her unwavering commitment to protecting American lives make her uniquely qualified for this role. A photograph appeared on the screen. Maggie's photograph. Her real name, her real face. No longer invisible. Her phone buzzed again, then continuously as messages flooded in from people she hadn't heard from in years. Elena. OMG, is that you? You're a hero. Marcus Commander Stone. Damn. I knew you were badass, but this is something else. Unknown number after unknown number. Old colleagues, old teammates, People from operations she barely remembered, all reaching out to congratulate her, to thank her, to tell her they'd always known she was something special. She sat alone in her apartment watching her life transform on national television and felt something she couldn't quite name. Not pride, not exactly. Something closer to acceptance. 28 years in the shadows. 11 months pretending to be someone she wasn't. A lifetime of service that no one was supposed to know about. And now finally she was being seen. The press conference ended. The networks moved on to analysis, to speculation, to the endless churn of the news cycle. Maggie turned off the television, sat in the silence. A knock at the door. She opened it to find Agent Chen standing in the hallway, a bottle of champagne in hand. "I figured you might want to celebrate. I don't know if that's the right word. Then we'll call it acknowledging." Chen smiled. "Can I come in?" They sat together on the small balcony, watching the sun set over the city while the champagne breathed. "How does it feel?" Chen asked. "Being famous." "Strange. I've spent my whole career avoiding exactly this. And now," Maggie considered the question, "now I think maybe it's time to try something different, to be someone people can actually see." "That's a big change." "Everything's a big change." Maggie lifted her glass. "To change. To change." They drank in comfortable silence. "So," Chen said finally, "are you going to take the job?" "I already said yes." "I know. I was at the press conference." Chen grinned. "I meant, are you going to actually enjoy it? Or are you going to spend the whole time wishing you were back in some cafeteria somewhere being invisible?" Maggie laughed. It felt strange, almost unfamiliar. When was the last time she had really laughed? "I think I'm done being invisible, at least for a while." "Good, because the world needs people like you in the light, Commander, not hiding in the shadows." "The shadows are comfortable." "Comfortable isn't the same as right." Maggie looked out at the city, at the lights coming on as darkness fell. Somewhere out there, Elena was starting a new life. Marcus was rebuilding his. Derek Vance was facing the consequences of his choices. And General Harrison was learning what it felt like to be on the wrong side of the system he had corrupted. All because she had refused to stay down. You know what the hardest part is? What? I still don't know if I did it right. Harrison Vance, the whole operation. I keep running through it in my head, wondering if there was a better way. If I could have stopped them sooner. If I could have saved more people. That's called being human, Commander. It means you're still capable of doubting yourself even when you've done something incredible. Is that a good thing? It's the best thing. Chen set down her glass. The people who never doubt themselves, who never question whether they could have done better. Those are the people who become monsters. Harrison never doubted himself. Look where that got him. Maggie thought about that. About the difference between confidence and arrogance. Between certainty and blindness. I spent 11 months letting Derek Vance call me trash. Letting him humiliate me in front of people who didn't know any better. And sometimes I wonder if it was worth it. All that patience, all that waiting. Couldn't I have just arrested him on day one and been done with it? Could you have? No, not without blowing the whole operation, not without letting Harrison's network survive. Then you have your answer. Chen leaned forward. Commander, you did something that most people couldn't do. You sacrificed your pride, your comfort, your identity, all for a mission that you believed in. And because you did, thousands of people are alive who would have been dead. You make it sound noble. It was noble. Even the parts that hurt. Especially the parts that hurt. Maggie picked up her glass again, watched the bubbles rise through the golden liquid. I used to think that being a warrior meant being strong, powerful, the kind of person who could walk into any room and dominate it. And now I think being a warrior means knowing when to be invisible, when to wait, when to let people underestimate you because that's what the mission requires. She drained her glass. The strongest thing I ever did was let Derek Vance think I was weak. And the second strongest, Maggie smiled, proving him wrong. The night deepened around them. The city glittered below, full of people living their lives, unaware of how close they had come to disaster. Unaware of the invisible warriors who had saved them. That was okay. That was how it was supposed to be. But for the first time in 28 years, Maggie Stone wasn't invisible anymore, and she was starting to think that might be exactly where she needed to be. The champagne was gone. The conversation had faded into comfortable silence. Chen stood, gathered her things. I should go. Big day tomorrow, first day of the new unit. I know, I'll be there. Early. Have you ever known me to be late? Chen laughed. No, I don't think anyone has. She paused at the door. Commander, thank you. For what? For showing me what real strength looks like. For reminding me why we do this job. We do it because someone has to. We do it because we can. Chen opened the door. See you tomorrow, Commander. See you tomorrow, Agent Chen. The door closed. Maggie sat alone in the darkness, listening to the city breathe. Tomorrow, a new chapter would begin. New challenges, new battles, new chances to make a difference. But tonight, she allowed herself to rest, to feel the weight of everything she had accomplished, to honor the sacrifices she had made. Derek Vance had called her trash, had told her to stay down. But trash didn't bring down traitors. Trash didn't save thousands of lives. Trash didn't change the course of history. She had stayed down when she needed to, and when the time came, she had risen. That was the lesson. That was the truth she would carry forward. The world would always have people like Vance and Harrison, bullies and traitors who thought power was the only thing that mattered. And the world would always need people like her, the invisible ones, the patient ones, the ones who knew that real strength wasn't about dominance. It was about knowing when to wait and when to strike. Commander Margaret Stone closed her eyes, let herself drift towards sleep. Tomorrow the work would continue. But tonight, she had earned her rest. 6 months had changed everything and nothing. Maggie stood at the window of her new office, watching the morning light spread across the training facility that had become her home. The building was unmarked, unremarkable, the kind of place people drove past without a second glance. Invisible just like the people who worked inside. But for the first time in her career, Maggie wasn't one of them. Her name was on the door now. Commander Margaret Stone, Director of Internal Threat Assessment. A title that meant something. A position that came with authority, resources, and the weight of expectations she was still learning to carry. Her phone buzzed. A text from Chen. Recruits are assembled. Ready when you are. Maggie typed back, 5 minutes. She turned from the window, caught her reflection in the glass. The woman who looked back was different from the one who had served coffee at Blackwell. Same gray hair, same lines around the eyes, same hands that had seen decades of service. But there was something new in her expression. Something that had been dormant for years, awakened by the events of 6 months ago. Purpose. Real purpose. Not the kind that came from following orders. The kind that came from knowing you were exactly where you needed to be. She straightened her uniform, checked her posture, and walked out to meet the future. The training room held 15 recruits. They sat in chairs arranged in a semicircle, young faces turned toward the door as Maggie entered. Some were barely 30. Others were closer to her age, experienced operatives looking for a new direction. All of them watched her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. She understood. She had felt the same way once, sitting in a room just like this, wondering what some stranger could possibly teach her that she didn't already know. Good morning. Her voice carried easily, years of command presence clicking into place. My name is Commander Margaret Stone. For the next 6 months, I'm going to teach you how to be intelligence officers. A hand went up in the back. Young man, early 30s, the kind of confidence that came from success that had never been tested. Commander Stone, with all due respect, most of us have been intelligence officers for years. What exactly are you going to teach us that we don't already know? Maggie smiled. She had been waiting for this question. What's your name? Agent Torres. Michael Torres. CIA 6 years. 6 years. Impressive. She walked toward him, slow and deliberate. In those 6 years, how many times have you been undercover? 3 operations, all successful. How long was your longest deployment? 8 months, embedded with a cartel in Mexico. And in those 8 months, what did you learn about the people you were watching? Torres frowned. I learned their operations, their distribution networks, their leadership structure. That's what you learned about their organization. What did you learn about them, the people? I don't understand the question. Then you've just identified the gap in your training. Maggie turned to face the whole group. Intelligence work isn't just about gathering information. It's about understanding people, their fears, their hopes, their breaking points, the things that make them human. With respect, Commander Saab, Torres said, our job is to neutralize threats, not to understand them. Your job is to protect your country, and you can't protect what you don't understand. Maggie walked to the front of the room. Let me tell you a story. 11 months ago, I was assigned to investigate a weapons trafficking operation at a defense contractor called Blackwell. Recognition flickered across several faces. The case had been in the news for months. My cover was a cafeteria worker, 54 years old, gray hair, orthopedic shoes. The kind of person nobody looks at twice. She paused. For 11 months, I served coffee to the same people every day. I learned their names, their families, their problems, their dreams. And that helped you stop the weapons shipment. That helped me understand the person running it, a man named Derek Vance, head of security. On paper, he was a decorated veteran, a respected professional. But underneath, he was broken, angry, carrying trauma that no one had ever helped him process. So you felt sorry for him. I understood him. There's a difference. Maggie met Torres's eyes. When I understood him, I could predict him. When I could predict him, I could stop him. And when I stopped him, I discovered that he was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. A puzzle that led all the way to the top of our intelligence community. Silence fell over the room. They knew the rest of the story. Everyone did. General Harrison ran his network for 15 years. He compromised 67 assets across 12 agencies. And do you know why nobody caught him? She didn't wait for an answer. Because everyone was so focused on the information that they forgot about the people. They saw data points and threat assessments and operational parameters. They didn't see a decorated veteran who had lost his daughter to a broken system. They didn't see a man whose grief had curdled into rage. You're saying if someone had understood him earlier, they could have stopped him. I'm saying if someone had seen him as a person instead of a position, they might have noticed when he started to change, when his loyalty shifted, when his purpose became something darker. She walked back to the front of the room, turned to face them all. That's what I'm going to teach you. Not how to gather intelligence. You already know that. I'm going to teach you how to see, how to understand, how to remember that every target, every asset, every person you encounter in this work is a human being with a story. And why does that matter? Because the moment you forget that, you become something you never intended to be. Maggie's voice hardened. I've seen operatives who were brilliant at gathering information but terrible at understanding it. They made mistakes, got people killed, became the very threats they were supposed to neutralize. Like General Harrison. Exactly like General Harrison. He was one of the best intelligence officers of his generation. And somewhere along the way, he forgot that the people he was supposed to protect were actually people. She paused. I'm not going to let that happen to any of you. Torres leaned forward, his skepticism shifting to something closer to interest. How? By teaching you what 11 months in a cafeteria taught me. That being invisible isn't a weakness, that patience isn't passivity, that the most valuable intelligence comes from actually caring about the people you're watching. She moved to her desk, picked up a file. Your first assignment. Each of you will spend the next 2 weeks in a cover identity, not as agents, not as operatives, as ordinary people doing ordinary jobs, watching ordinary lives. That seems like a waste of resources. That's what I thought too once. Before I learned that the most dangerous assumptions we make are about the people we think don't matter. She handed out the assignments. 2 weeks. Then we'll talk about what you saw, what you learned, what you understood. The recruits filed out some more willing than others. Torres lingered at the door. Commander Stone, yes. That story you told. About Blackwell. About understanding people. He hesitated. Is that really how you stopped Harrison? By understanding him? Maggie considered the question. The honest answer was complicated. She had stopped Harrison through a combination of skill, luck, courage, and choices that still kept her awake some nights. But the core of it, the thing that had made the difference, was simpler than all of that. I stopped Harrison because I saw him clearly. The man he had been and the man he had become. And because I refused to become like him, even when he gave me every reason to. What does that mean? It means that in this work, the greatest threat isn't out there somewhere. It's in here. She tapped her chest. It's the part of us that wants to believe the end justifies the means. That some people don't deserve to be seen as human. That power is more important than principle. That sounds idealistic. It sounds like survival. Harrison forgot those things, and look where it got him. I remembered them, and I'm still standing. She walked past him toward the door. Think about that while you're on assignment, Agent Torres. Think about who you want to be when this is over. She left him standing there, wrestling with questions he had never thought to ask. That was the first step, the beginning of understanding. The rest would come in time. 3 weeks into the training program, Maggie received an unexpected visitor. She was in her office reviewing reports from the recruits' field assignments when her assistant knocked on the door. Commander, someone here to see you. Says her name is Elena Ruiz. Maggie looked up, felt something warm spread through her chest. Send her in. Elena walked through the door, and for a moment Maggie barely recognized her. Gone was the terrified young woman who had cried in the Blackwell break room. In her place stood someone confident, composed, with a light in her eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago. Mrs. Hayes. Elena caught herself, smiled. I mean Commander Stone. I still don't know what to call you. Maggie works. Always has. They embraced, and Maggie was struck by how much stronger Elena felt. Not physically necessarily, but in the way she held herself, the way she stood. You look good, Maggie said. Really good. I feel good. Better than I have in years. Elena sat down across from her desk. I got a new job, victims advocacy, helping people who went through what I went through. That's wonderful. It's because of you. All of it. Elena's eyes shone with emotion. You changed my life, Maggie, not just by saving me from Vance, by showing me what real strength looks like. I don't know about that. I do. Elena leaned forward. I watched you let him humiliate you, day after day, week after week, and I thought you were weak. I thought you were just another person who couldn't stand up for herself. A lot of people thought that. But you weren't weak. You were patient, strategic. You were letting him think he had power over you so that when the time came, you could take everything from him. Elena shook her head. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen anyone do. Maggie didn't know how to respond. Praise still made her uncomfortable, even after 6 months of receiving more of it than she had in the rest of her career combined. I was doing my job. You were doing more than that. You were showing people like me that strength doesn't look the way we think it does. Elena paused. I tell that story now, to the people I work with, the ones who think they're too weak to fight back, too broken to matter. What do you tell them? I tell them about a 54-year-old woman who pretended to be a lunch lady for almost a year, who let a monster call her trash and tell her to stay down, who waited and watched and planned until the moment was right. Elena's voice trembled with conviction. And then I tell them what happened next, how that woman rose up and brought down not just the monster, but his entire network, how she saved thousands of lives and changed the course of history, and how she did it all because she refused to believe that being invisible made her worthless. Maggie felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back, but not before Elena saw. You're crying. I'm not. You are. I've never seen you cry before. I don't usually. Maggie wiped her eyes. It's just, I spent so long being invisible. being no one. And now people tell me I'm a hero and I don't know how to feel about that. You feel proud. Elena reached across the desk, took her hand. You feel proud because you earned it. Every moment of patience, every day of humiliation, every time you chose the mission over your ego. You earned every bit of what you have now. It doesn't feel that simple. Nothing worth having ever feels simple. Elena squeezed her hand. But you know what I've learned in the past 6 months. Feelings don't have to be simple to be true. They sat in silence for a moment, two women connected by circumstances that had transformed them both. Marcus sends his regards, Elena said finally. He's doing better. Got into a program for people with gambling addiction. Says you're the reason he had the courage to try. He did that himself. He did it because you showed him it was possible. Elena smiled. That's what you do, Maggie. You show people what's possible, even when they can't see it for themselves. After Elena left, Maggie sat alone in her office processing the conversation. She had spent 28 years in the shadows doing work that no one would ever know about. And now somehow she had become something different, something visible, a symbol, an example. She wasn't sure she was comfortable with that, but maybe comfort wasn't the point. Maybe the point was to be what people needed her to be, even when it felt strange, even when it didn't match her image of herself. Her assistant knocked again. Commander, there's a letter for you. Came through official channels, but it's marked personal. From who? A pause. Derek Vance. Maggie felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had visited Vance once 6 months ago in that federal detention center, had said what she needed to say and walked away. She hadn't expected to hear from him again. Bring it in. The envelope was plain white with her name written in a careful hand. No return address, but the prison's official stamp marked it as legitimate. Maggie opened it, began to read. Commander Stone. I don't expect you to read this. I wouldn't read it if I were you. But I'm writing it anyway because I need to say some things, and you're the only person who might understand. I've been in therapy, 6 months of it now. The prison has a program for veterans, and the counselor is good. Better than anyone I've talked to before. She doesn't let me make excuses. She doesn't let me pretend I'm something I'm not. For the first time in my life, I'm looking at who I really was, who I really am. And I don't like what I see. You were right that day you visited. I became the thing I hated. I let my pain turn into cruelty, and I hurt people who didn't deserve it. I hurt you. I hurt Elena. I hurt everyone I was supposed to protect. There's no excuse for that. I'm not writing to make excuses. I'm writing because I wanted you to know that what you said stayed with me. About the choice. About being able to become something different right up until the end. I don't know if I can become something different. I don't know if there's enough time left or enough of me that's worth saving. But I'm trying. For the first time in decades, I'm actually trying. The counselor asked me to think about the moment when I started to become what I became. The moment when I could have chosen differently and didn't. I keep coming back to Declan, to the day he died. I was holding him and I made a promise. I promised I would never be weak again, never be vulnerable, never let anyone hurt me the way I was hurting in that moment. But you know what? That promise didn't make me strong. It made me hard. It made me incapable of connection. It made me the kind of person who could call another human being trash and not even flinch. You could have killed me that day in the parking lot. You had every right. Instead, you stopped me. You showed me mercy I didn't deserve. And I've spent 6 months trying to understand why. I think I finally get it. You weren't being weak. You weren't being soft. You were being strong in a way I've never understood. The kind of strength that doesn't need to destroy to prove itself. The kind that can look at someone like me and see not just the monster but the broken person underneath. I don't know if I'll ever see you again. I don't expect to. But I wanted you to know that you changed something in me. Not completely. Maybe not enough. But something. For whatever it's worth, I'm sorry. For everything. Derek Vance. Maggie read the letter twice. 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in her desk drawer. She didn't know if Vance would actually change. Didn't know if the man who had called her trash could become someone worthy of forgiveness. But the letter itself meant something. The fact that he had written it. The fact that he was trying. Maybe that was enough. Maybe trying was always enough. The training program continued. Weeks became months. The skeptical recruits became engaged students, then capable operators, then colleagues. Maggie was proud to work alongside. Agent Torres, the young man who had questioned her methods on the first day, became one of her most dedicated students. He returned from his field assignment transformed, humbled by what he had learned about the people he had spent 2 weeks observing. "I never realized," he told her one afternoon after a particularly intense training session, "how much I missed by not really seeing people, by treating them as targets instead of humans. Most of us don't. That's why we need to be taught. You weren't taught. You figured it out on your own. I was taught. By 30 years of mistakes. By people I failed to understand until it was too late." Maggie shook her head. "The lessons cost more when you learn them that way. So we're lucky. You're prepared. There's a difference." The facility hummed with activity as the program grew. More recruits arrived. More classes began. The principles that Maggie had discovered in a cafeteria at Blackwell spread through the intelligence community one operator at a time. And slowly, incrementally, things began to change. Reports came in from the field. Operations that succeeded because someone took the time to understand their target. Crises averted because an operator saw warning signs that others had missed. Lives saved because the right person asked the right question at the right moment. The work was making a difference. 1 year after the Blackwell operation, Director Garrett called Maggie to Washington. She sat in his office, the same office where he had first offered her the job, and listened as he outlined the impact of her program. 14 operations in the past year where your training made a critical difference. 6 internal threats identified and neutralized before they could cause damage. A 30% reduction in operational failures across all participating agencies. Those are good numbers. They're exceptional numbers. And they're just the beginning. Garrett leaned forward. "Commander, what you've built here is exactly what this community needed. A new way of thinking about intelligence work. A new approach that doesn't sacrifice humanity for effectiveness. I had good people to work with. You had people who needed someone to show them a better way. That was you." He paused. "I want to expand the program. Double the recruitment, triple the facilities. Make this the standard for intelligence training across every agency. That's a big commitment. It's a necessary commitment. The old ways aren't working anymore. The threats we face are more complex, more human, more resistant to traditional methods." Garrett met her eyes. "We need people who can see what others miss. And you're the one who can teach them." Maggie thought about it. The quiet life she had given up, the garden that had gone untended, the book club she had left behind. None of it seemed important anymore. "What do you need from me? Your continued leadership, your vision, your willingness to keep fighting for this approach, even when people push back." Garrett smiled. "And maybe a little less of that invisibility you're so good at. The world needs to see what you're building. I'm not very good at being visible. You're better than you think, and getting better every day." She left Washington with a new mandate, new resources, and a sense of purpose that had only grown stronger over the past year. The car drove her back to the training facility. She watched the landscape roll past, thinking about everything that had brought her to this moment. 28 years in the shadows. 11 months as a lunch lady. 1 year building something that might actually change the world. It wasn't the career she had planned. Wasn't the life she had expected. But it was hers. Every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of patience and pain. Hers. Back at the facility, she found her newest class of recruits waiting in the training room. 20 faces, young and old, skeptical and eager. The future of American intelligence ready to learn. Maggie walked to the front of the room, looked out at them, and began. "My name is Commander Margaret Stone. Let me tell you a story about a 54-year-old woman who pretended to be a lunch lady for 11 months. The room fell silent. They called her trash, told her to stay down, treated her like she was invisible, worthless beneath notice. She paused, let the words settle, and she let them, day after day, week after week. She let them believe she was nothing because that's what the mission required. Eyes widened, faces leaned forward. But here's what those people didn't understand. Here's what I want you to learn before anything else. Maggie's voice dropped, filled with the weight of everything she had survived. Being invisible isn't weakness. Patience isn't passivity. And the people who look like they have nothing are sometimes the most dangerous people in any room. She looked at each of them in turn. They told her to stay down. She stayed down until the moment was right. And then she rose up and brought down a network that had been operating for 15 years, stopped an attack that would have killed thousands, changed the course of history. How? Someone asked. By remembering something that everyone else forgot. That intelligence work isn't about power or violence or domination. It's about understanding. Seeing people clearly even when they don't want to be seen, even when they've forgotten how to see themselves. She walked among them, making eye contact with each recruit. Some of you are here because you want to be heroes. You want the glory, the recognition, the sense of doing something important. She shook her head. That's not what this work is about. Then what is it about? Service. Real service. The kind that doesn't need recognition. The kind that happens in shadows and silence and moments no one will ever know about. She returned to the front of the room. I spent most of my career being invisible, and for a long time I thought that was a burden, something I had to endure in order to do the work. Her voice softened. But I was wrong. Invisibility isn't a burden, it's a gift. It lets you see things that visible people miss. It lets you move through the world without the weight of ego and expectation. It lets you become exactly what each situation requires. And being visible now, leading this program, how does that fit? It fits because the work has changed. Because now, instead of being invisible myself, I'm teaching others how to be invisible, how to see, how to understand. She smiled. The mission is different, but the principle is the same. It's not about me. It's never been about me. It's about the people we protect, the lives we save, the future we're trying to build. She looked out at her recruits, saw them absorbing her words. Over the next 6 months, I'm going to push you harder than you've ever been pushed. I'm going to make you question everything you think you know about this work. And some of you will hate me for it. Why? Because growth is painful. Because the things I'm going to teach you require you to change. Not just your methods, your fundamental understanding of what it means to serve. She paused. But if you stay with it, if you do the work, if you let yourself become something new, her voice filled with conviction, you will be the most effective intelligence operators this country has ever produced. And more importantly, you will be people you can be proud of. People who never forgot that the work is about humans, not just information. A hand went up. Young woman, early 40s, the cautious look of someone who had been disappointed before. Commander Stone, what if we fail? What if we can't live up to what you're describing? Maggie considered the question. It was a good one, honest, the kind of question that deserved an honest answer. You will fail. All of you. Multiple times. In ways that will make you want to quit, to give up, to believe that you're not cut out for this work. The woman's face fell. But here's what I've learned after 30 years of failures that nearly broke me. Maggie's voice rang with certainty. Failure isn't the end. It's the beginning. Every mistake, every wrong turn, every moment when you fell short of who you wanted to be. Those are the moments that teach you who you actually are. She walked closer to the woman. The question isn't whether you'll fail. You will. The question is whether you'll get back up, whether you'll learn from it, whether you'll let it make you better instead of bitter. How do you know when to get back up? You always know. The hard part is doing it. Maggie smiled. But that's what we're here to learn. Not how to avoid falling, how to rise after we do. The training began. 6 months of intensive work. 6 months of challenges designed to break down old assumptions and build new capabilities. 6 months of becoming something more than they had been when they walked through the door. Maggie watched them grow, watched them struggle, watched them fall and rise and fall again. And on the last day of the program, she gathered them one final time. You came here as agents, operatives, intelligence officers. She looked at each face, seeing how much they had changed. You leave as something more, something that this community desperately needs. What do we leave as? Humans. Fully human, fully capable, fully committed to a way of serving that doesn't require you to sacrifice your soul. She walked among them one last time. Out there, you'll face pressure to abandon what you've learned here. People will tell you that understanding is weakness, that compassion has no place in intelligence work, that the old ways are the only ways. Her voice hardened. Don't listen to them. Don't let them convince you that becoming hard is the same as becoming strong. The hardest people I've ever known were also the most brittle. They broke when the pressure got too high because they had nothing inside them that could bend. And the strong ones stayed flexible, stayed human, stayed connected to the reasons they started this work in the first place. Maggie paused. That's what I'm asking of you, not perfection, not superhuman capability, just the courage to stay human no matter what this work throws at you. The graduates filed out ready to face whatever came next. Maggie watched them go, felt something settle in her chest. Pride. Real pride. Not in herself. In them. In what they had become. In what they would do. That night she sat alone in her office looking at the photograph she kept on her desk. 3 children smiling at the camera. The children of a fallen teammate, the ones she had carried in her pocket through 11 months at Blackwell. She touched the photo, remembered the man who had been their father. Remembered all the people who had shaped her, challenged her, believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. I hope I made you proud, she said quietly. I hope this is what you would have wanted. The photograph didn't answer, but she felt something anyway. A warmth, a presence, a reminder that she wasn't alone, had never been alone. The mission continued. It always would, but so did hope, so did purpose, so did the belief that one person patient and persistent could change everything. Derek Vance had called her trash, had told her to stay down, but trash didn't build training programs that reshaped entire intelligence communities. Trash didn't mentor the next generation of operators. Trash didn't prove over and over again that real strength came not from dominance but from understanding. Margaret Stone had stayed down when she needed to, had waited when others would have acted, had trusted the process when everything inside her screamed for immediate action. And then when the moment was right, she had risen. That was the lesson. That was the truth. No one could keep you down unless you let them. No one could make you invisible unless you chose to be. And no one could define your worth except yourself. She stood, walked to the window, watched the stars emerge over the training facility that had become her home. Somewhere out there, her graduates were beginning their journeys. Elena was helping victims find their voices. Marcus was rebuilding his life. Derek Vance was sitting in a cell wrestling with who he wanted to become. All of them changed. All of them growing. All of them proving that transformation was possible right up until the end. Maggie smiled. 55 years old now. Gray hair. Lines on her face that told stories most people would never hear, and stronger than she had ever been. Not despite the years. Because of them. Every gray hair represented a lesson learned. Every line mapped a place she had been, a challenge she had overcome. Every scar reminded her that she had survived things that should have destroyed her. She was not trash, had never been trash. She was Commander Margaret Stone. Warrior, teacher, survivor. And she was just getting started. The night deepened around her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students, new chances to make a difference. But tonight she allowed herself a moment of peace. A moment to appreciate how far she had come. They had told her to stay down. She had stayed down until she was ready. And then she had risen and the world had changed. That was her story. That was her legacy. And it would endure long after she was gone. In the operator she had trained, the principles she had taught, the lives she had touched. Invisible no longer. Finally, fully, completely seen. Commander Margaret Stone closed her eyes, felt the weight of her accomplishments settle around her like armor. The trash had risen, and nothing would ever push her down again.